Good evening and welcome to the June 28th, 2021 Select Board Agenda meeting. We are starting a little bit early because we have the Governance Committee joining us this evening, and John Cronin is on his way. He's caught up at work and will be joining us in about 10 minutes. But we're going to go ahead and get started. Just know that he'll join us midway through. So I understand that you need to call your meeting to order, Sam. I think I see. There's Sam. So I'll let you go ahead and do that, and then we'll get started together.
Sam, you're on mute.
All right, let me try this again. Pursuant to the Governor's June 16th, 2021 Act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law.
I can't hear you, Sam. Is it me or is it your audio?
No, I've never had problems with audio before. I'm not muted.
We can hear you fine.
Keep going.
Governance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that participants remotely attending this meeting, please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, a roll call attendance will be taken from the members. So we'll start with, let's see who's with us. Okay, we'll start with Mr. LeBeau.
Present.
Ms. Lingham.
Present.
Mr. McKechnie.
Present.
And Mr. Tyler present. Our member Len Engel is traveling, so won't be able to join us today for tonight.
Okay, so Sam, thanks for joining us tonight, and thank you all Governance Committee members for joining us as well. And you're here tonight to talk about your work plan for the upcoming year. You've had some meetings to discuss, and your intention here is to present that work plan to the Select Board?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean,
George.
I think that the Select Board at one of our previous meetings had really asked for more of a long-range plan as to what we would address. So we have basically put it together based on town meetings, and that assumes that the the Select Board would authorize bylaw articles to be addressed at the October town meeting. Otherwise, we'll have a packed annual town meeting in May. So for the October 2021 town meeting, based on upcoming, retirements, that we would start looking at the Board of Assessors and the Principal Assessor, and then at the same time look at the bylaws for the collector or treasurer collector and town accountant. The latter two, the issue is not the appointment process. That's been set by Chapter 94 of the Acts of 1994, which created the town administrator position. But for the Board of Assessors, we will look at that issue in terms of basically who's responsible for the selection of the Board of Assessors, who's responsible for the selection of the Principal Assessor, and we want to make changes. So we have started work on this. We've yet to sit down with the three financial officers separately to talk about their bylaws. I think for the treasurer position and the town accountant position, it's more, can we find language in other towns that would sort of bolster the bylaws in Holliston, or are we fine? So we don't expect to spend a whole lot of time with those two positions, but we'll spend time talking to a number of people regarding the Board of Assessors. So that would be for October. For the May 2022 town meeting, the first order of business would be a review of the town administrator position. You heard me say before that in 1994, when the Government Study Committee made a recommendation to create the town administrator position from the executive secretary position, in order to gain support, basically didn't provide a strong town management structure. And in fact, the authority of the town administrator we recommended was weaker than the town administrator position and its authority in other towns, other neighboring towns. Back then in 1994, weaker than with other towns at that time. And since then, I think we'll find that as a result of the changing conditions in terms of municipal management and challenges, that towns have made changes in terms of the reliance on the full-time town administrator or town manager. And, you know, Holliston has not done anything. So I think we will be looking at, you know, trying to bring this position up to par with other comparable positions in other towns at this time. And so I think that would make some, you know, multiple recommendations. We will look at how we might be able to sort of achieve some of what we were attempting in Article 9 at the last May town meeting regarding the financial responsibilities and the budget responsibilities of the town administrator. So we've got a lot of work to do before we get to that point, and a lot of people to talk to. Other issues that we thought about for the May 2022 town meeting is to go back to our recommendation of the Capital Planning Committee that was part of Article 9. Seemed to be support for that. It really does make sense, and we think we ought to go back to that. We may, depending on time and amount of change, we may also look at the town clerk position at that time for that town meeting. You know, obviously it's an elected position in Holliston, but we're finding that in more and more towns, it's becoming a appointed position. Thought of it more of a ministerial or administrative responsibility as opposed to policy responsibility, and therefore becoming more of a appointed position. And we'll see whether that makes sense for Holliston or in our view, and whether we would recommend it or not. I think after that, and in the October 2020 meeting, we expect that certainly by then the Division of Local Services Technical Assistance Bureau that is now in Holliston interviewing or doing town officials will have a set of recommendations that present, and that some of those recommendations may be recommendations that in some cases we've heard from them before, or they're new, and so we're leaving room for that. We've also decided that basically after the October 2021 town meeting and each subsequent town meeting, we will reassess where we stand with this work plan, so that if there are other newer issues that need to come up, we'll be able to make adjustments. But that's, and then the other issues in the May 2023 town meeting, first thing we would look at will be the select board and its responsibilities, but also its manner of I guess, organizational structure. We have a 3-member elected board now, always be an elected board, but obviously there are a number of towns that are moving to a 5-member board, and will something that ought to be considered in Holliston. And beyond that, for the May 2023 town meeting, I think there's expectation there'll be further Technical Assistance Bureau recommendations that we'll want to look at. And and there's some other issues we're talking about, but it's not in the plan yet, but those would come further on, in 2023. At the end of all this, when we get through, see where we are. I think one other issue we'll want to look at is, should Holliston create a town charter with its administrative organizational articles? Because we're seeing a lot of towns that have a charter that deal with, the operation of the town, but then there's the bylaw articles become, details of other issues outside of governance or administrative organization. So that's not a certainty by any means, but it's something that's on the list to consider.
Sam, did I hear you correctly that your work plan is something that you would revisit after each town meeting, or you would do it on an annual basis?
I think we talked about doing it after each town meeting.
Okay.
That may, sort of like the capital budget, that after every year there's a review and changes. Whether it becomes after twice a year or once a year, but nevertheless, we'll continually look at the issues that we think we should be addressing, or others have suggested we should address. And it's in the plan if we felt it's necessary. We also, and this is one that I think the select board also raised at one point, we want to make sure that we're not missing any opportunities that are available through the Municipal Modernization Act, which we haven't addressed so far, because I think we have more pressing issues to deal with right now. But it is a state law that we will look at and determine whether there's provisions that we think the town or that we would like to recommend to the town of Holliston for consideration.
Okay.
So that takes us through our work plan as it stands right now. I think the one certainty is certainly for the October town meeting, dealing with the Board of Assessors, the Treasurer Collector, and the town accountant. And when you're dealing with those three, one other issue that has popped up, but that it may be a little premature, and that is creating a finance department that those three departments could encompass, technology and data, and if there's any separate function for data processing. It is something that eventually we want to decide whether it's something that ought to be pursued or maybe not necessary. So it's on the list anyway to look at.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I'm just going to turn to Travis for a quick question, and then I'll open up to John and Ben for comments and time to respond. Will the Technical Assistance Bureau, Advisory Bureau, will they also incorporate the Modernization Act? Is that something that they're going to look at and apply to within their recommendations?
Yes, it'll be in sort of an undertone of what they're looking at.
Okay.
And so just as an update, because Sam referenced the interviews that they've been doing, a lot of information they're obviously collecting on Holliston. So I appreciate the time of everybody who's scheduled their interviews with the DLS tab unit to date. So they started with obviously the Select Board, the Finance Committee. They talked to Sam, knowing that the Governance Committee has started its work. Also myself, the finance staff, and actually what they've moved on to most recently is sort of the next level, which is all of the staff under the Treasurer Collector, under the assessors in the accounting department. And so that's a level that they're at the moment. So just to kind of give a sense of how detailed they're getting. And I'd just like to expressly thank Mary Bosquet. Sharon Emmerich and Liz Greendale, who, put together a substantial amount of the information that DLS Tab requested, that took quite a while to compile. So thank you to the three of them as well.
Okay. All right, so let me turn it to John and Ben for comments, Dan. Is that all right?
Sure.
John?
Hey, good evening. Sorry for being a little late here, but I wanted to first start off by saying hello to everybody. You folks did yeoman work last year. A lot of hours, a lot of effort. I really appreciated the product you put forth to the town. It didn't all work out according to what we had hoped, yet I think in the form of discussion, the town had a very vibrant dialogue over the work that you produced. And there comes one of my questions. I think we have to accept the fact that change is difficult, especially within local government, where, continuing to do something because we've always done it that way seems to be the mantra. But Sam, you're confronting, and your committee is confronting years of inertia. A lot of people don't really look at Holliston's government as broken or in need of repair, or so much out of step that we need to take new steps, new direction. Having seen how things worked out this spring and looking at what you have lined up for October and May, you folks are still tackling some contentious issues. You're looking at elected positions, consolidation of roles, really confronting a lot of the same themes that we've already seen this past spring. What would you recommend for us going forward will be different from the Governance Committee's work to convince the citizens that we need to tackle these things to improve the way we do things?
Well, I think that some things we have talked about, but it didn't resonate, is that it's been 40 years since there's really been any hard look at the governance structure, the organizational structure. At that time, as we said, municipal government has become much more complex, much more challenging conditions. And we have spent a good amount of time looking at other towns and how they've changed. And it's just striking that Holliston really is the same as it was 30 years ago, and not taking advantage of both enabling legislation such as the Municipal Modernization Act, or trends of basically providing more responsibility to the full-time professional staff of the town, because it has become much more complex. And we just need to, I'm not just in terms of this is all we need to do, but I think we've got to hammer that message that government has changed and the town of Holliston has not changed with it. And, there's drawbacks to that. And, we also, I think we've learned a lot about how we should proceed and react based on the experience of, going into the Maytown meeting, and we'll be better prepared. I think this, starting off with the issue with the Board of Assessors and the treasurer and the accountant, I think that'll be less contentious. I think, we'll be looking for recommendations from officials of those departments more. And I think there's also the matter of, if you look at the organizational table that, that Paul put together and how wide it is, and, the number of elected positions versus appointed positions, and then compare that with other towns, it's, again, it is striking that, so we've got to do more in terms of, public education and approach in terms of, preparing for town meeting and the recommendations we make for town meeting. I would open this up to the other members that would like to say, respond to that question as well.
Yeah, hey, Sam, it's Scott McKechnie. Hey, John and Select Board. John, we wrestled with that after that town meeting, to be honest with you. And, I think going forward, something that we have to be be more cognizant of is the benefits of our recommendations, not just because other towns are doing them or have done them, but what the effects have been on those towns. So that seemed to resonate as though that's what the townspeople wanted to see and hear, not just that other, majority of other towns changed. That doesn't matter in Holliston. We need to show what those benefits are and what the effects are. So I think that's kind of the game plan that we have going forward.
So, in other words, the approach taken in the first round will be altered. Your committee understands the need for greater public outreach, more effective public outreach, and in a measurable way that can help citizens, by the time they get to town meeting, have a clear understanding of why these changes are beneficial. That's the goal.
That's certainly part of it, of course. And then obviously the presentation has to be more succinct as to the benefits, not just that other towns have made these changes, but show the townspeople what those towns have, what the changes have done for those towns. Show the benefits.
My second and last question, Sam, relates to the May 2022 agenda, where you're going to recommend additional information for the Capital Planning Committee. To the extent you might have an idea of how that will work with the newly created Citizens Long-Term Planning Committee, they're going to be looking at a lot of different factors regarding the quality of life in Holliston and some of the priorities that are emerging. Is that a group you'll be working with, collaborating with, counseling with, or is it parallel to what they're doing? Can you explain a little bit about where you're heading?
Sure. I think it's a group we will meet with and understand, where they are and where they're heading. I don't see that there's going to be duplication. Our processes, or what we would do would be, dealing with the sort of the budget process. And I think they're looking at, whether I guess those that, how that would be influenced, who would be responsible, but we will be in touch with them, just so we're not conflicting in terms of the thrust that we're on versus theirs. But I don't see that as an issue in the sense that I think we're dealing with the operational details versus outcomes so much. We're doing it to improve the capital budget process, but it's dealing with the budget process than it is where they want the town to be. Make it more efficient to get there, but it's still it's a different look than I think they would have.
Thanks, Sam. With your permission, I'd just like to make a comment, if I could.
Yeah.
I volunteered for the town for the last 25-something years. I'm getting old at this, I know, but I'm still in amazement when I see people step forward in our community to serve in various positions, whether it's putting themselves out there to run for an elective office or join an appointed committee. I remember meeting with Tina Langham, seems like a long time ago, I think it was pre-COVID, somebody who had not really immersed herself or into any of the elective processes in Holliston, but she was strongly curious about how she could put her foot into this governance committee work and bring a citizen's perspective to what you all were doing. Paul, Sam, certainly Scott, and the others, you all have great experience doing this. Tina came in as a rookie, and I was always in awe at what she was putting herself out to. And I mean that, Tina. I hold you in high esteem, putting yourself in the position over the last year to contribute with your colleagues on this work. Very impressive, and it's the stuff that makes our community run. So please accept my personal thanks for your volunteerism, your work on the board. I think you had exposure to some of the best volunteers Holliston offers, and I hope to see you again soon somewhere down the road.
There's the hug right there.
Thank you so much, John. I'm so honored by your comments. Thank you. And Sam's done a fabulous job leading this committee. So thank you for entrusting me in that role.
Thanks, Tina. Good.
Well, let me,
So-
if I may say, just because, John, you stole my thunder, but you know, this is, unfortunately for us, Tina's last meeting. She'll be stepping down from the governance committee at the end of the day on Wednesday, June 30th. And so we will miss her. I mean, you're right, that, I mean, I think the other members, I mean, Len Ingalls, the other guy who's got extensive experience both on the planning committee as
Yep.
well as the community preservation committee. So we're all sort of seasoned guys, and we got this newbie coming on, and it's been pretty helpful to get, you know, an outside perspective on the issues that we were dealing with. And but that, you know, the fact that she didn't have the prior experience didn't seem to hinder her ability to reach out and contact officials of other towns and do the homework that we have. So we're very appreciative of her service and wish her well, and wanted to make sure, I guess you already know, but that this was going to be her last meeting.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you.
And,
All right, well,
Leadership.
well, let me just say that at our last meeting, we all chimed in terms of telling Tina how much she helped us and thanked her. So we're not, I don't know if anybody wants to do it again, but this is really just to let the select board know that, you know, one of our members is stepping down.
Well, I'll let Ben go. I'm sure he'll have a word of thanks, and then we'll move on.
Well, I mean, yes. But I do want to I'll thank Tina specifically, but I also want to thank all of you for the work you put forward. Sometimes things like this are controversial, and it's important that we have these conversations as a community, and we start to think about what kinds of government we really want. You know, doing it the way we've done it is not always the right answer. It's okay to continue to do so, but we should understand why we do things. But I do have a couple of questions. So my first question is that, you know, we talked a lot about, you know, you're talking about sort of educating the public on the importance and the benefits of the particular changes that you're talking about. Is there any other public input as to what kinds of changes need to be made? Are you taking any public feedback about like direction or anything like that, aside from some of these conversations with particular officials or boards?
Well, this is Sam. I'll respond. We did have 2 public hearings prior to the Maytown meeting. It was limited participation and mainly in response to what was being recommended. So we didn't receive any recommendations that I recall anyway, that in terms of other issues that who our residents would like us to take a look at. I think we'll do more along the line of reaching out and using social media as another means of seeking input in terms of you know, residents' views on the town. So you'll see us doing more than what we did in, you know, last year.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's important. I think we should have some public discourse and try to understand some of those things that might be very important to residents, that you might be able to take and run with. A specific question I have for you is, does it make sense, I'm getting a little technical here, does it make sense to separate revising the town administrator article and reviewing the select board? Now, I understand in terms of like workload that might be required, but it seems like to me that a lot of the responsibilities might be moved from one to another. And I just, you know, are we putting ourselves in a position where we might have overlap or some challenges by separating the two by a year?
Well, I think the the reason for what we've done so far in terms of this plan is just to make sure that the big issues are in the May town meeting rather than a special town meeting. And I mean, Ben, you may have a good point in terms of some of the things we want to change for the town administrator could have an impact on the select board. We'll have to see when we get into the details whether that's the case and decide whether we need to move up the select board look, but it may also may not. So again, we want to have at least one major issue for the Maytown meeting and recognize it's a full warrant, and hopefully we don't have recommendations that take 2 hours in a town meeting, but whatever it takes is we need to deal with it. And but I think right now anyway, we can come back and look at it again, but right now I think the town administrator article is going to be one that we would make a number of changes. Obviously this will be in discussions with the select board and the town administrator, and we'll have to we have to do more research in terms of what changes there might be recommended in terms of the select board, other than whether it should be 3 or 5 members. The manner of selection in terms of being elected is not going to change. So it's really doing the research to determine whether Holliston is at a point where having 5 members would be better than having 3. And there's pros and cons both ways. So it's not like a automatic recommendation by any means.
Okay. Shifting gears a little bit here too. Are you considering looking at things beyond bylaws in terms of how things are done? Any specifics? Particularly, I mean, one example we could give is you talked about the org chart that Paul had put together. Do you have any desire or initiative to make a recommendation to this board, for example, to make changes in that regard, or are you strictly looking at bylaws in your efforts?
Hey, Sam, if I may just jump in, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It's Scott. Great question, and I hope we don't just look at bylaws, and I'm pretty sure we won't. And one thing that we're trying to do is listen to what we heard at the town meeting and some of the other meetings we've had. And one thing that I heard and we've talked about internally is the presentation of the omnibus, for example. I think people were frustrated that there's one number that they're voting on. They don't see recommendations, they don't see requests, they don't see guidelines, they don't see any of that. It's kind of all hidden behind the scenes. So, does that have to be a bylaw? No. Should it be a recommendation from someone like us? Probably. So those are some of the ideas that we've been floating around. So I think to answer your question is hopefully it's not just bylaws. It's a little bit of everything to make the governance of this town better, and and information shared more readily. So more transparency.
I think that just to add on to that, that is that, if we address the issue of manner of selection of the Board of Assessors, the manner of selection of the town clerk, part of the reason for doing that is what we saw in the organizational table of, such a broad span of responsibilities and independently elected boards or so it's hand in hand. It's some things we might look at that don't require a bylaw change, but sometimes it's the information that we have prepared that allows us to view the town in a different way and look at the bylaws as they stand reflecting or in terms of what we're seeing as like the organizational chart. So it's working with both sides in making recommendations.
Do you have any other questions, Ben?
No, just a quick comment.
Okay.
So just, thank you. And I think what's important to, I'd like to see is just making sure that we remember that as a governance committee, the idea is to see how we can make the government work better for the residents. And that certainly means there's some technical aspects, but particularly for the, the average person should be able to see a more streamlined, efficient system that they can engage with effectively. And I think that particularly is important to me. So that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay. Sam, we have a very full agenda, so I'm just going to make a comment, and then unless your committee has questions, I think we'll move forward in the agenda. The one comment that I would like to make is as you prepare for October town meeting, as you look at the Board of Assessors, Principal Assessor, and the bylaws around the treasurer and collector positions, I would just ask that you seek feedback from the TAB people who are coming in through BLS. Seek that feedback from Travis, as well as any feedback from Standard & Poor if they're in town and providing feedback to us, that gets incorporated into your work as you prepare for the October town meeting. And I do want to, we don't have to get into it tonight. I'm just going to drop this one and let you guys talk about it at your next meeting. But, any steps that address succession planning through any bylaw changes or recommendations that you're making, I think that's really important. That is something that I hear time and time again across all municipalities, all communities, but specific to Holliston as well, is that we as a community, as a town government, we are actively planning for succession. And so if there are aspects to the recommendations you'll be making for October town meeting that improve succession planning or enhance it, I think that's a really key point to start thinking about and making. So I just wanted to make those two comments. Do you have any questions for us before we move on? Or do you have any comments that you'd like to finish with?
Well, I'd like to just react to what you said, and that is, I think we have a track record of trying to sit down with as many town officials as we can related to the work we're doing. So select board would be part of that. Certainly the town administrator would be part of that. We do have a work plan, but we're still looking for, what town residents also feel are important. And then the only question I would have is whether, Travis, you have any additional information regarding timing or I guess work product coming from the Technical Assistance Bureau.
No, as I said, they are now, I would assume, this is going to round out the interviews, I believe, this week with the staff level of each of the finance departments in town. And at that point, I expect the next level of scheduling, so I'll just be in touch with the board and the governance committee on that if there's any other information they need. Otherwise, hopefully, we'll be moving from information collection to some information that, output that we can be using as a community. So I will be following up shortly, but they are wrapping those up this week. So.
Yeah, well, one thing that I'm pleased to hear is that they are going to go back and look at their 1988 report to Holliston, because I think there are recommendations there that they can repeat again. So anybody else from our committee have questions?
No, all set, thanks.
Okay.
All right, so I believe, Sam, you're going to adjourn, and quickly before you do it, thank you, Tina, for your service.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you all. Thank you all for your service to the town as well.
Good to see you all. Appreciate the update, Sam.
Thank you. So
A motion to adjourn? Oh, Len
Second.
seconded
That's
that.
not here.
Second.
Second, Paul, okay, Tina did it.
All right. Mr. LeBeau,
Aye.
Ms. Lingham,
Aye.
Mr. McKechnie,
Yes.
Mr. Tyler, yes. Okay, we are adjourned.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Tina.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Take care.
Tina.
Have a
Yeah.
great summer.
Thank
All
you.
right, so we're going to move on. we're gonna move on to, number 2 on our agenda, which is the host community agreement transfer for 91 Home Drive here in Holliston. And we're just bringing in, WLMA Incorporated. Hello. Hi, how are you? Good, how are you?
You can adjust those seats, actually, just talking to the microphone.
Sure.
To have you here.
Thank you, nice to be here.
Nice to be outside in the world.
I'm Tina Hines, Joan Select Board, John Cronin.
Good evening.
And
Hi.
Farrell and Travis Severn.
Joanne Rowe. Meet you.
Wonderful to meet you. I'm Meg Nash. I'm from Vicente Cedarburg. I'm working with Jill and her company, WLMA, who's hoping to have an assignment of the HCA that was previously granted to Mass Botanicals. So we were previously here via Zoom on
I remember.
June 7th, and provided an overview of the operations and the facility, and at the board's request, wanted to come back and provide a much more formal presentation, kind of walking through the scope of operations, a little bit more about Jill's experience, anticipated municipal demands. So I'll turn it over to Jill to take the lead in describing the scope of operations at 91 Cunningham, and then, of course, if the board has any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
So you ready for presentation?
Yeah, so can you just say next slide then? Sure. Thank you. Like Meg said, we're just gonna I'm gonna go kind of quickly. I don't wanna take too much of your time, so please feel free to interrupt or ask questions, when you need. Thanks. But we're gonna talk mostly per your request last time about the facility, the scope of renovations, a little bit about our operations, the anticipated demands, odor mitigation, the capital expenditures, and our projected budget. So WLMA actually stands for White Label Massachusetts. My company is called White Label. We are a contract manufacturer of mostly edibles and other manufactured THC-based products. We also cultivate our own cannabis to go into those products in some markets where there's more of a third-party system. So in Colorado or Oregon, where the market's more mature, we will rely on third-party cultivation. Here in Massachusetts, we're going to need to do both to start, and so the market just gets a little bit more robust on that whole kind of vertical. So we are vertical. We don't have a dispensary at this point. We will be looking for one. Not necessarily in Holliston. You guys don't allow the rec dispensaries. But right now we are operational in Colorado, Ohio. Ohio is a medical-only market. Oregon, we are medical and recreational in Oregon. Michigan, we're pre-licensure. We've purchased a facility there, much like we are looking to do here in Holliston. So here in Massachusetts, we would be cultivation and product manufacturing only. And even though this is a new facility for us in Massachusetts, I've actually been active in the Massachusetts market since the beginning of 2015, advising people on their applications way back when it was just medical only. So Garden Remedies was one of my first clients, so I've been pretty familiar with the Massachusetts market and really excited to come back and do it with my own enterprise this time instead of working with others. Next slide. This facility is on Cunningham Drive. It is in the industrial park. I do believe there's at least one other manufacturing facility in that industrial park, so we would not be kind of in an area where there's already facilities located. Again, it passes all the state rules for distance. Next slide, please. This facility, the property is long. It's about 4-acre property, but the facility sits on the entire property. We don't look at any expansion there at all. We'll completely gut, although it's kind of gutted. I have some pictures in here later. The facility is pretty raw and rough as it is. Right now, it's being used as a Craters and Freighters shipping facility, but it's pretty raw in there. So we will be renovating the entire thing. There's ample parking, though. If you can see, there's parking in the industrial park, and there's parking on the site for any employees. We anticipate 20 to 25 employees to start, 45 at full production. We have a history of hiring locally. We'll hire all local. Some of our managers from Colorado, as our main facility, will fly in and train people. I was kind of telling Meg, we like to hire people with comparable skills who haven't necessarily worked in cannabis quite yet, because they're easier to train. We have a full-blown program and SOPs, and it's a lot easier to take someone who's intelligent and can learn than to have somebody who has bad habits from other operators. So that's how we tend to.
What is SOP?
Standard operating procedures. So, and that, the state looks at those. It's kind of required in all cannabis operations to have fully fleshed out standard operating procedures to make sure for quality control reasons and security. Next slide, please. The scope of the facility renovations, this actually is pretty exciting for me because this is a fully funded project. We are able to have 3 different design partners on this, and that's Stoke, which is an owner's rep company, a sustainability advisor, which we've never had in a build before. Path and Gate Architects, they are out of Arizona. They are very familiar with cannabis builds, and then Reconstruction is their general contractor. They're out of Chicago. They will hire all local subcontractors, though, when they manage this project. The facility will be renovated with complete GMP-grade finishes. Our design standards focus on 3 priorities, which is product quality, so making sure that the lights are the right type for manufacturing and that the wall finishes are washable and things like that. Employee safety. We don't do a lot of vertical stacking in our grows. We feel like that's dangerous, so we try to use benches and people over employees on the ground instead of working on ladders. And then sustainability. Stoke, as I mentioned, they're our owner's rep, which means they interact with the contractor and architect on our behalf to help save us money and make sure they're not over-engineering. But one of their specialties is also sustainability, so we are going to try to get a LEED certification for this building. It's not a promise. I don't know if we'll be able to. It's a very it's a good goal, and we might just get prepped to get there, but that's why we hired Stoke, because that's one of their principal core things is sustainability. As you can see the pictures, it's rough. It's not, the insulation is torn. The roof needs full replacement. So that building will pretty much be, I don't even want to say gutted, because there's nothing to gut. It will be completely refinished. We'll use LED lights throughout. We are LED growers. We are soil growers. And the preliminary construction budget is about $9.9 million, and that's without equipment. That is just on the facility renovation. Next, please. Odor control. This is spec'd out by state rules, but it's something we're very familiar with. We'll use carbon filtration. We also will pretty much use a lot of ventilation and fans. We'll pipe it up and out so that it goes above any air smell level. So that's our primary way of odor control is carbon filtration. And with the manufacturing, there's very little odor that results from that. And because we will have a closed system, so the cultivation rooms will not exhaust out. So it will bring in fresh air and it will recirculate and it will not exchange air. So that will help a lot with our smell. Next slide, please. So a little bit about, so we are a contract manufacturer. I have a little bit more about our products on more slides. So we mostly focus on product production versus cultivation of flower in whole. So we turn it into oil and turn it into products. So it generally is not leaving the facility as whole flower. We are a living soil grower, so we're not really allowed to say organic, but we are Clean Green certified, which in states where we grow full outdoor sun grown, it means we're fully sustainable. We use local products to the best we can. We cannot get a sun and earth certification here in Massachusetts because we will be indoor, but we can get the Clean Green certification. So we will, the energy efficiency standards are both, designated by the commission and the LEED certification if we can get one. So next slide, please. Short-term goals is to get operational as quickly as possible, focus on what we call pantry products, which are the very basic gummies and vape pens and oils, which get you operational and to market very quickly. We would like to, in Colorado, we're in 70% of the dispensaries. In Oregon, we've been there a little bit less than a year, and we're at 30%. So we're hoping to be at 50 within, 1 to 3 years. Year 4 plus, we will move our cultivation operations to a secondary location, preferably outside, because we are some growers, in a state where, or a town where it's allowed and more rural, and we will focus this facility to be 100% manufacturing. So as we're designing it now, those cultivation rooms will be easily convertible to manufacturing rooms. And because we're soil growers, we don't use a lot of hydro equipment. There's not a lot of special drainage or anything that's required. So those rooms can just flip pretty easily. And we'll begin to focus on more novel products as we go. But we really focus on cash flow first and sustainability with employees and benefits. I didn't mention this here either, because we are a fully operational company, and in many states we have a full benefit package for employees. They get health insurance and 401k matching they need to be there 90 days, but it will be implemented from day one because we're in multiple states. We use United Healthcare because right now it's in all our states. Hopefully it's in Massachusetts, or we'll have to switch again. So, next slide, please. We are going to apply for 20 to 30,000 square foot cultivation license. Manufacturing doesn't have any tiers on it, correct? Right. So those 2 licenses will be applied for. We will do a full renovation. There's no phase build out. We're going to do the entire building at once. We are Clean Green certified, as I said. This is the one that we can have here as an indoor grower. And then our sustainability, I think you guys asked about plant care and cultivation philosophy. I am an entrepreneur, and I've been in this industry for several years, but I'm a parent, first and foremost. I have 2 kids, and I like to leave on a sustainable planet. So when we talk about sustainability, it's really not just lip service. It's something we truly believe in, and as a result, we are what's called a living soil grower. So we reuse our soil. We don't throw it out. We, instead of using pots, we'll use these big beds. So we try to kind of mimic an outdoor grow inside. And so we'll keep using that same soil until it's no good any longer. We do not water through our plants, so basically we water exactly what they need. So in a hydro system, there'll be a lot of water waste. We don't do that. We just water exactly what the plant needs. We use a calcium-based nutrient system. We like to compare it like whole foods for plants. So instead of using synthetic salt, we are using calcium-based feeding systems. Our pest management is all essential oils and beneficial insects. And Massachusetts is actually very strict on chemical use regardless. So even if we weren't natural growers, they pretty much prohibit everything the state does, which is great. Whether or not they test well, I don't know. But irrigation practices, again, we use we hand water each plant, so we don't use irrigation systems, and we only use what's needed. And actually, cannabis is a very low coefficient plant. It uses a lot less water than most people think it does. Our operations, we use every kind of extraction method possible, from CO2 to butane to rosin. It depends what the end product is. So certain food products, CO2 works best because it leaves no flavor and no essence. Some people want more of a natural, full-spectrum medication that will be a butane or a rosin extract. So it really kind of depends what product's going into. Clean Green also certifies our extraction methods, meaning we only use 99.9% food-grade gas solvents, and all of our extraction methods are also certified as clean. Product manufacturing, we follow the American Herbal Products Association recommendations. All of our employees are certified, and SOBs, that word again, is kind of based on long-standing recommendations for the industry. Next slide. These are some of the products we're making in other states. Whether or not they'll come to Massachusetts right away, I'm not sure. WANA is actually here with another manufacturer, so we will not be doing WANA in Massachusetts. The Pantry is actually a keto product, so keto chocolate product, yes, for THC. Lucid Mood is one of our vape pens. Happy Chews is a taffy-like product, and marshmallows are just kind of fun. Birthdays is a rolled joint as a birthday gift, and then those are pre-packed glass smokables, and then that is a natural enhancement product for women. So we're kind of all over the board, anything from topicals to candy. Next slide. This is kind of our space allocation and our usable projections. We are going to have approximately 30,000 square feet of canopy, but that's only about 22,000 square feet of flowering space. And again, we imagine that will all convert to manufacturing over 4 years. And then the next slide. And so water demand, you guys asked about that. Our peak daily demand is about a gallon per plant, so it's only in flowering. So it really kind of depends on the month and time in the cycle we are, but at the very peak demand when that entire facility is full and flowering, it would be about 5,000 gallons a day. And then electricity, I think it's actually going to be a little bit lower than that. The engineers are still working through it a little bit, but we wanted to be on the high side. I think it's probably going to be more around 200 kilowatts a month, but I just wanted to make sure we didn't undershoot that. Again, we use all LED lighting, no high-pressure sodium. Because we need, that facility has nothing right now, it's kind of beneficial because everything will be brand new and high efficiency. So we use spray foam insulation instead of the old school type of insulation. All the air handlers and HVAC will be high efficiency. We've just started looking at rebates from the local utility providers to kind of see what we can do there. So that is the nice thing that, it's going to be expensive. Everything will be brand new. Next slide, please. And then again, the solid waste, we try to use soil. It will probably be used for about 5 years, so that, and then plant material will be composted as allowed by under regulations. Anything else will be used away from the collector. Wastewater disposal, again, we don't have any wastewater. So, and then any of our containers, because we're not using any chemicals, they're just rinsed and disposed of for instructions. So any nutrient containers are non-toxic. We don't even use RO, reverse osmosis, because it wastes so much water. We will basically take the most recent water test from Holliston, and we will use filtration to filter out chlorine and heavy metals in that. So, and then tracking and monitor usage, we will use like a square D power logic monitor. So because everything's brand new again, it's nice because we can look at everything we install and make sure that the energy is being used properly. And then this is kind of our budget. Again, the designers are still nailing down this very specific budget, but right now our rough, we have our DD drawing set, so 50% complete design set, and this is the budget we have off that design set. So it might vary 10-15% either way, usually on the upside. I've never had a contractor actually lower my bid, so I think we'll only go up from that. And that, I think, projected profit and loss. This is over 5 solid years. 2021 is just, an all expenditure year for us. And then next slide. Yeah, and then my information, please call me anytime. I will be around a lot. And then I did add a video. We don't have to watch it, but if you guys have it and want to see what one of our newer, Ohio is our most recent brand new facility, so you can kind of see the finishes and how we go. Okay. It's about 4 minutes, if you can see
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. So now I'll turn to the board, and then I'll turn to, if there's anyone on the call who'd like to ask questions. Are you all right with that?
Yep.
Okay, John?
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. Jill, the proposal is to transfer an existing license from Mass Botanicals to WLMA, correct? Mass Botanicals didn't do anything in that space at all?
Correct.
No build-out? And you're acquiring the building, there's no lease?
Correct.
You'd be the owner outright? So I think folks need to understand that the prior agreement with Mass Botanicals is being reset. So if we enter into this agreement, we restart the 5-year clock. Your presentation was helpful, but it didn't give me a sense of when you expect to begin cultivation. It said 2020. Did it say FY 2022 for revenue?
Yes.
But can you give me a timeline of when you expect to open your door? So that leads to when we start getting our money.
Yes. Our design set should be done, we're 50% complete, so let's call it August 1st, then we have to come and get permits from you folks. And at the same time, Vicente Cedarburg is working on our state licensing, so I am hoping 8 to 12 months we should be approved to start putting plants in the ground, if that sounds reasonable.
Yes, and we did provide in our prior presentation more of a detailed timeline based on sort of projections plus 30 days from the approval of the HCA. We, can work on the state licensure, which I believe projected having, doors open through architectural review with the state by August of 2022. And I will say that, the way the Massachusetts regulatory system is established, if their product manufacturing facility is up and running, they will be able to purchase wholesale flower from other cultivators. So even while there is a period of time where they're getting their cultivation operations up and running, as soon as they're through that architectural review, that will open the door to purchasing wholesale flower to begin operations and to begin generating income profits.
Does WLMA envision at some point offering medicinal retail sales?
I've thought about that. That property has a small facility that's on the other road, not on the home. It has a small facility at Concord where we might be allowed, but at this point, no, we don't. We're gonna wholesale to the entire state, and that's generally our model is manufacturing. It is nice to have a retail outlet when and if we can, because you can kind of beta test products, and with the brands, it's nice to have a little bit of leeway to do things there, but at this point, we're 100% focused on getting this up and out the door. We would love to have a dispensary at some point, especially in town and close by, but I know it's not something that you guys are doing now, so.
Right, we were approached by another grower on the medicinal side, which is a different path, and it's always good to have our eyes open as we...
We were gonna look into that a little bit. In Colorado, we had, adult use come in after medicinal, and we still have a pretty robust medicinal system. So one of the things I kind of wanted to look into is if it is worth it, because that facility in Concord might be in the right district, but if it's, I don't know how Massachusetts has gone with adult use coming in after medical. Sometimes the markets are really rough to operate in.
And for the purposes of tonight's conversation with respect to the assignment of the HCA with Mass Botanicals was only limited to cultivation and product manufacturing.
I completely understand that, but representing the town, I just want to probe, find
We
out what
would
you're
like
looking ahead
to.
at, that's all.
If you consider adult use stores in the future, we'd very much be interested in turning that building on board into one.
Notwithstanding that, it's the question of the medicinal piece, which is a different path, so.
Possibly. We will look at it. It's not our first priority, like you said, is getting up and running and doors open because it's a very large construction project. So I think that the construction timeline is actually gonna be the thing that drives us versus licensing approval, where in some states it's different, but it seems like the commission is pretty caught up. So I think it's how fast can we get through planning and construction is actually gonna be our timeline.
Thank you, Joe, I'm all set.
Okay, thank you, John. Ben?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. And first comment I'd want to make is I do appreciate you talking about sustainability. I think that's very important to us in this community. But I wanted to get a little more specific, particularly about water use. As you know, we have our own water system here in Holliston. So, you talked about using 5,000 gallons a day. Is there any recycling going on, or are you taking all of that from the network?
I'm taking all of that from the network, but again, that is just on peak demand. So we will have 4 to 5 flowering cycles per year. So the flowering cycles are approximately 70 days long. So we can have about 5 per year. And so that 5,000 gallons a day is used 10 weeks a year, so 2 weeks for each of those 5 cycles. So it's the very last 2 weeks of those feeding cycles. And prior to that, the use is a third of that during veg.
Okay.
So it will be much less. I just wanted to give you the peak, but no, we don't recycle any of it. We don't put any of it back in because it's, again, it's soil-based, so it's all going right into that pot, and it's just staying there. So we have no runoff or wastewater going there.
Okay. Second question is, could you talk a little bit about security measures you'll have in place for the facility? I didn't hear anything about that. Like what kinds of...
Yeah, I think there was some on the slide. I will meet all state requirements. We generally will be working, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, so we don't have a full-time security guard, but we will have a fully integrated security system that, alarms and tags, and we'll have we'll hire a manager locally who hopefully lives within, we try to make sure they live within 15 minutes, so that if there is an alarm, they can respond. So we always make sure that there is some manager, assistant manager that is available every day to respond.
Okay. And,
sorry, I just wanted to add there, that the state requirements with respect to security are very stringent in terms of surveillance coverage, camera coverage, alarms, approved security plan, and obviously they wouldn't be able to become operational until that was all reviewed by the state and approved. So there'll be additional checks and balances along the licensing path.
We do everything in our power to avoid false alarms, because we understand it's a drain on local law enforcement, so that's why we're very particular about our managers being closed, because they're the first people that are called, and we typically will use a third party, not someone who can check in on the cameras, so that if there's an alarm, the alarm company will check the cameras and see if it's a real one or a false one before they notify local law enforcement, because I understand the drain that false alarms can have on local TV. Absolutely. They do not like it.
My last question is, do you have any initiatives or anything you do within communities? Like, are you kind of just do you have any community engagement in any way? Like, for example, we have a farming community. Do you do any outreach to farms or anything like that to help out with education or anything like that?
Not typically on the manufacturing side. We're happy to, but it's usually in markets where we're sun-grown, it's easier to have farm tours and talk about sustainability and talk about living soil and growing and that. But when we're more isolated in an industrial park, we tend to be more secure and not as out in the community unless we are retail. I mean, we're happy to, and like I said, for hiring, if there are any ag schools or programs or things where it makes sense to hire from, we absolutely would love to be involved. But we try to be a little bit more for security reasons.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, and I get that. I just was thinking, just to my own.
But if you've got training programs or ag programs, so in Ohio, our facility, Northeast Ohio, I think every one of our employees came from the 4-H club. So, I mean, it's just kind of depends on the community. Okay. I'd love to be involved.
Great.
So does that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Really appreciate you coming back to talk to us. Thank you.
Appreciate you guys having us and meeting every Monday.
I have a couple questions. I'm going to start with the slide that talks about the proposed facility, and you make point in your presentation about not being located within 500 feet of any public or private school, daycare center, but you also make mention of not being in close proximity to library, playground, park, martial arts, dance studio, house of worship, pediatric medical office, toy store, or comic book store. Could you just sort of dive into that a little bit? It was important enough that you put it on the slide. I'd like to hear more.
Sure, absolutely. So the state regulation now is that you can't be within 500 feet of a K through 12 private school, private or public school. So those are the state regulations. That's a baseline that everyone must comply with. Prior iterations in other municipalities with respect to kind of setting those buffer zones will look beyond just a private or public school to sort of focus in on more where children gather. So the importance of putting that in the presentation was to highlight the fact that we're not just satisfying the regulatory requirements with respect to the public or private school prohibition, but we're also significantly isolated and, in the industrial zone where it's appropriately to have this type of facility. So it's an above and beyond measure in terms of satisfying state requirements.
I think I know where this is going, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. You talked about your security. You talked about your odor control in terms of carbon filtration and the not smokestack, so the exhaust exchanger, whatever, going up above you described above air smell level, which I don't know that term, but I'm thinking it's some level above the ground at which the smells dissipate and it's not reaching the human nose on the ground. Is that why it matters? Like, why does it matter that you have gone above and beyond? Because security is not going to be an issue. Odor, as you described, is not going to be an issue. So you can just give me a little bit more detail, because I'm going somewhere with this. I just want to hear what you guys have to say.
Sure. I just wanted to, include it in the presentation to reflect the fact that, it's important to WLMA to not only be meeting, but where we can exceeding requirements in terms of having, proper location. And obviously this facility has already been approved, pursuant to the HCA with Mass Botanicals. But I'm curious as to...
Well, my question is, where you're operating in Ohio, Oregon, and Colorado, have you operated any facilities within a community that's identified as a drug-free community? And has that altered your practice or your decisions within those communities, if that's the case? I'm assuming it's a federal program, so I'm assuming it's an option in those states.
Drug-free school zones, and obviously we don't operate in any of those, but I'm not familiar with what a drug-free community is.
Okay.
Actually, I have to admit that.
Okay. Where you're here for cultivation manufacturing, I don't think it's today's conversation, but I was just curious to hear how you operate in other states and so on. And do I understand correctly that at the point of when you start operations, you will also be manufacturing? You have a timeline where after 4 years you're moving into solely manufacturing, but you intend to start with manufacturing as well as cultivation, and you think that will come on board before the cultivation actually starts because to bring products in?
Well, it typically does just because of timing, because cultivation takes approximately 4 to 5 months to actually harvest, where if there is enough availability of third-party product, your processing facility is approved at the same time. So you're essentially idle for 4 to 5 months unless you can buy off the third-party market. But Massachusetts is tight and the market's tight, and so the cost of that third party is really high. So unless things change dramatically, I'm not sure if it will be. It's all kind of a math problem about whether or not paying X dollars for a pound and then extracting it makes money or loses money.
I have one more question and then one comment. So you said no wastewater, but how do you handle the humidity within the building?
Well, traditional HVAC, really pretty much, because we're not...
You're not collecting it and...
Right, we're not hydroponic, so that we have a lower humidity level than most start with, because we're not cycling water through the building. And so normal HVAC and plus some extra dehumidification can carry those loads. And then what you're pulling out of the air actually can get cycled back into our water system. So what we do pull can go back in.
Okay. I think your focus on strong employee benefits is great. I appreciate that you shared that with us, and I think the fact that you're putting $9.9 million to improve this facility is great. I'm going to just sort of nudge in the direction of considering solar array on the buildings, but I'm sure Stoke will consult with you and advise you.
Yeah, we'd love to, and like I said, we're still looking at all possible rebates and whether or not we can finance that. One of the biggest difficulties we have as a cannabis company is we don't have normal access to financing. So that solar array, if we want it, we probably have to come up with 50% cash up front if we want to even attempt to finance it. And so a lot of our decision-making, unfortunately, is not based in how regular businesses can act, but I would love to. Yeah, we do have solar in Colorado. It's something
So
we,
you're familiar with it?
yeah, we'd love to, but a lot of times the programs, they can finance for you, and the installers will actually give you the program and do a 20-year lease. And since we are purchasing the building, it makes a lot of sense to do that. So if we can find someone who will lease the cannabis, we will certainly take a look at it. Plus, our use of LED lights actually reduces our power to a fourth of what traditional growers demand. So it's been really good for us. And our grower thankfully doesn't say that it doesn't work. It's 100% bought in. So a lot of growers will be like, oh, LEDs don't work. Yeah, they do. They actually do. They've been using them in greenhouses in Amsterdam for 30 years. I'm pretty sure they work.
So what I'm gonna do now is just turn it to, those listeners on the Zoom call. If there's anybody who'd like to raise a hand to ask a question or make a comment, give you a minute or two to do so. Okay, so I see Sarah Baroud. So Sarah, go ahead and just introduce yourself and give your address, please.
Hi there, Sarah Baroud. I'm at 21 Lowland Street, so we would be a very close neighbor to this business. And I know this is not how decisions are made, but just curious, excuse me, if you could tell us what kind of neighbor you would be. I mean, you say that would be in an industrial park, which is absolutely true, but with very close proximity to a very heavily used public rail trail, and then also with a residential neighborhood right next to you. So I'm just curious, like, what kind of neighbor would we expect you guys to be versus some other business that might be there? Thank you.
Sarah, forgive me, I'm gonna jump in on that one and just say, I think that question you might wanna direct to the next item on our agenda, which is 56 Lowland Street, the HCA request. And the name of that company is Story of Massachusetts. WLMA is located in the New Englander Industrial Park, which is off of 126 as you're heading towards Ashland. So I don't wanna correct you if you're not mistaken, but I think perhaps your question is, I'm gonna ask you to hold it if I've got it right, and wait for Story of Massachusetts. Does that sound right?
Yep, absolutely. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No problem, Sarah. We'll look for your hand on the next agenda item. So anybody else for a question for White Label and Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else for White Label Massachusetts? Okay. So you are looking for the board to consider an assignment of the current HCA with Mass Botanicals to be, well, John, you've got the motion there, but
I do.
I would look for a motion.
Move to authorize town council to negotiate the transfer of the host community agreement for cultivation and manufacturing assigned to 91 Cunningham Drive from Mass Botanicals to WLMA LLC, and to change the effective date of the five-year agreement from September 7th, 2018 to June 28th, 2021.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Any comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank
very
you all.
much. Thank you for coming
I look
in.
forward to working with you guys a lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Good luck, guys.
If there are any jobs programs or anything, give me a heads up, because we will be hiring,
Great.
hopefully
Thank
sooner
you.
than later.
Good luck. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we're gonna move on now to the third item on our agenda, which is the host community agreement request for 56 Lowland Street by Story of Massachusetts LLC, and I believe they're on the call, so if you guys wanna mute yourself and introduce yourself, you can go ahead with your presentation.
Great, thanks. Thank you very much to the select board for the opportunity to present tonight. My name is Mike Isengay. I oversee the real estate for Story Cannabis Company, and I'm joined by Eben Von Ranson, who's our VP of Operations, Egan O'Keefe, who is our cultivation expert, and Marcus Fairless, who is our national architect and lead designer. I'm happy to share my screen if that's easiest to pull up the slides, whichever you prefer.
Should be all set, Mike.
Okay, great. I will do that right now. All right, can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Well, we put a brief agenda for tonight's presentation, thought we could highlight who we are, our industry experience, the project team specifically. We can talk through some of the existing conditions and intended upgrades to the building, as well as several good neighbor considerations that we've been spending a lot of time on in consideration of this project. At its heart, Story is a cultivator and retail-centric brand that is developing and acquiring assets in Massachusetts. We like Massachusetts specifically because of its high growth prospects and wide consumer base. Our co-founders are two major industry veterans in Jason Bedati and Beth Stavola. Jason formerly founded a company called Harvest Health and Recreation, which he grew from the ground up and ultimately took public in 2018. And Beth Stavola is a leading female entrepreneur in the industry. She founded a company called MPX, which is one of the top producers in the US. And, Beth is a frequent keynote speaker at national industry events. And most importantly, she's just been a champion in building female and minority leadership in the industry. Our project team is led by Marcus Fairless, who's on the line here. He's with S45 Studio Architects, as well as Joyce Hastings with GLM Engineering. She's located right here in Holliston. And given the age and prior uses of the building, which we'll talk about in a little bit, we have FLI Environmental and Vineyard Environmental, who will be helping us with any remediation in the building should the project move forward. So I guess with that brief introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Marcus Fairless. Marcus will highlight some of the existing conditions of the building, as well as some of the intended upgrades should the project move forward. So Marcus, take it away.
Hey, can everybody hear me tonight?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
Great. Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time. I'm Marcus Fairless, Studio 45 Architects. We're looking at this building on 56 Lowland Street. I think that's the building that Sarah had a question about. And yes, we are next to the Rails Trail. It's approximately a 45,000 square foot building. It's on 4 acres. It's a 70s building, and you can tell it hasn't had a facelift since the 70s. Actually, for an industrial facility, it does have a bit of architecture to it. We like the adjacency to the trail and be able to get back to the community and make something that is an eyesore and back into something that is producing and productive once again. It's got a little bit of brick, but it's conventional steel. So this is an old industrial building that is made with original steel members and has some architecture in the interior as well. 18-foot ceilings, and then a small office space that you can see at the corner, which is approximately 3,200 square feet. Next slide, Michael. Building, it's got some disrepair on the outside, but a lot of it's cosmetic. We have scanned the building and done some research on the inside. The bones are good. The structure is good. It's mainly the metal panels that are bad, even though one problem with that is metal panels are very hard to get right now, but we'll have to find a way. The foundation, although it does have some mold and looks a little ragged from the outside from water damage, it's actually structurally sound and in good shape. There's some graffiti and some urban blight around the sides. I mean, this is close to a neighborhood where I think people pass by the trail and occasionally get in there, past the broken down fences. There's some trash on site and a woodland area behind the building, which you can see there. From the parking lot needs some renovation. The front entry is overgrown, some pallet storage, some of the typical vacant building items. Next slide. This is the back sideways loading dock, and then the front side yard, which is somewhat secure. Next slide. This is the train rail system. Used to have a train car system that would go through this building and be able to transport down the railroad. That has since been vacated, and so that is a lower part in the building, and it has 2 heights on the slab. There is fire protection in the building and a operating motion sensor light. The insulation of the building needs to be remediated pretty much throughout the entire facility. We would consider this facility pretty much a gut with the inside and outside keeping the structure. Some of the things that we plan on doing, envelope upgrades like we spoke of, landscaping around the building. We want to be a good neighbor. We are right on the trail. This is right next to the neighborhood, which is not, although this is an industrial park, we see that it does need to have a little bit nicer face than your typical industrial building. Offices and bathrooms, complete renovation. The parking lot's in disrepair. We would have to repave the parking lot. New HVAC, of course, and a new roof, and some structural reinforcement for mechanical equipment and just renovation of opening up some of the spaces. And then new electrical, of course, we would need an all new electrical service and transformers. Basically everything. This is a rendering of the building post renovation. And you can see we've kept a lot of the architecture in the front, revamped all of the windows, repaved the parking lot, done new landscaping buffer in the front, and we've put up a security fence. And at this particular location, we've done a core 10 security fence that we feel is a little nicer than your typical straight security fence with barbed wire or cyclone fence. This will be a piece that will be opaque to the trail and blend in. Core 10 gets rusty to a point and then stays that way. You can see the trail in this graphic. So we're right off the rails trail. And so we have to be cognizant of that. And then right beyond that vegetative buffer is the neighborhood, which backs up to this facility. So all of the things about screening and being a good neighbor apply very much here. We propose doing the 10-foot fence, 3 foot off of our building face that will buffer us from that trail. And we'll also do a vegetative buffer in front of that, which will help, I think, just improve the landscape along the trail in this area, and then also create a noise buffer from both the neighbors to us and us to them. Parking lot renovations here. You can see we've done a little bit of landscaping in the front with the xeriscape, new mechanical equipment, and a new facelift on all of the metal panel. Next slide. The Upper Charles Rail Trail obviously is right next door. So that buffer and putting in, can you go back one slide, please? Going back to that adjacency, that is something that we have planned on giving back to as a neighbor of the trail and of the neighborhood. The Rails to Trails program is something that we're interested in contributing to. So we want to be a good neighbor. Odor mitigation, we have a fog system in place, and we also have carbon filtration that would allow us to hide 91 to approximately 96% of the odor that would be omitted. This shows, we're getting kind of, go back a couple of slides, Mike. One more, please. One more. Property perimeter fencing, landscape buffer, employee monitoring, and security. We would have a permanent security staff on board 24 hours a day, and then video surveillance that would also be in place. You got to talk about lighting, site lighting. We want to use low impact lighting that will be motion sensitive and not light up the neighborhood and adjacencies. Next slide, please. This is the trail and how close this facility is next to the trail. That would be where our new, there is some great vegetation there, evergreen vegetation. We would propose putting in a lower canopy here that would make this look more natural and not so industrial adjacent to the walking trail. Next slide, please. This new trail screen shown approximately 10 foot off of the trail. And then you see the new tree line that we would propose in this rendering that would help conceal the trail from the industrial park peripheral. Next slide, please. This is another view looking towards the building. You can see we're keeping the existing vegetation and adding new. Next. Odor mitigation. This is a state-of-the-art system with the fog that will essentially eliminate 91 to 96%. Those are funny percentages, but that's virtually all of the odor. Once it goes through the carbon filter and goes through the fog system, that will keep the adjacent neighborhood from having any airborne scent that gets up into, on a windy day, no matter how hard you exhaust that up into the air. There's definitely what goes up must come down. And so we're looking at a different method to take care of that. Next slide, please.
So this is Evan Von Ranson. I'll cover this part quickly. So we obviously will have all required security measures in place. As Marcus mentioned earlier, we're going to have the security fence, which will provide a sight screen. So none of the operations will be visible, although 99% of all operations do happen inside the building. The facility will be equipped with a fully monitored security system, clearly alerting the local police in the event of a break-in. All the entrance doors will be equipped with a key card access system. So only authorized personnel with the correct key card can access any or specific parts of the building itself. We will have a high resolution surveillance system that incorporates 24-hour recording and on-site storage, as well as cloud-based storage for at least the minimum state requirement in case people need to go back and look at some things in the past. As Mark has discussed before, we're going to be very conscious of the lighting. I can't imagine any neighbors with like big bright lights shining across the trail or into their yards. So we were going to use motion activated and dimmable system so we can keep light pollution to a bare minimum. And we will have an on-site full-time compliance and security officer who will address any security issues and ensure that all of the cannabis products are tracked properly and recorded as spec'd by the CCC. Go ahead, next slide, Mike. Regarding traffic, that's been some concerns that we've heard in other projects that we've been working on when there are neighborhoods adjacent. So after studying the map and visiting the site, we'll have all of our traffic will be directed to basically operate away from the neighborhoods. We will not have excessive delivery or truck traffic. We try to order most of our bulk products quarterly, so we can limit the semis. There obviously will be employee traffic and certainly small local deliveries, but they won't be in large noisy semi truck type of vehicles. And this will be also reiterated in the employee handbook. We want to make sure that we do what we say we're going to do. So next slide, Mike. Noise mitigation. That's also another concern with the locality to the neighborhood. So we've had Marcus look into some HVAC screening for any of our HVAC units that are outside that obviously do have fan systems installed, but we will be using the latest and greatest, if you will, which have a tendency to be quieter than, say, older equipment. But additionally, we were going to put a sight screen that has noise absorbing capabilities to basically sort of absorb and direct any noise towards the park and protecting the neighborhood. I think we already kind of talked about the perimeter fencing. This is also going to, since it is solid, as Marcus shared, versus a chain link type, that will also keep most of the noise, even from the vehicle traffic, inside the premises, rather than it bothering people in their backyards. And our operation it certainly is a 7-day-a-week operation. Primarily, the weekends really will be the cultivation team for the most part. The normal manufacturing and processing will be taking place, 8 to 5-ish as a general rule. So not, again, not to be disruptive to the local people in their off time. Sorry, I had a reboot there. Anyway, we certainly look to hire local. We want to support local business, the local community. It breeds, I think, at least in our experience, a tighter team rather than pulling people from all over the place. Healthy culture is a very important thing in all business, as you all know. So we will be working on employment website, local job postings on local media sites, and put together job fairs when we need to add to our employment. Go ahead, Mike.
So I think with that, we'd love to just turn it over to Q&A. And if there's any specific questions you'd have, we'd love to answer those.
Okay. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Evan. So I'm going to turn it over to John and then Ben and myself, and then we'll turn to the listeners on the Zoom call. John?
Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Story, for the presentation. Very well done. Travis, can I ask you at this point how many host community agreements Holliston has enacted so far since we got into this business?
We have 7,
including the transfer that we just approved, right?
right, including the transfer. There are 7 that have been issued. 4 of those are underway. At least have been issued a CO from the building inspector. You just saw 1 got transferred, 1 has not made any movement, and the other 1 is under construction. So it's 3 in Hoppingbrook Industrial Park. There's 1 active in Lowland Industrial Park. This is the second request for Lowland Industrial Park. And there are 2 in the New Englander. And then the other address is 201 Summer Street, which has no activity but has a HCA for testing.
Sorry to step on that. The one on Everett Street within the Lowland Industrial Park, that one has a certificate of occupancy?
Yes.
And they are operational now?
They were issued a CO in October of 2020.
Okay.
So the reason I'm asking the question to our colleagues here at Story is to sort of demonstrate that I think Holliston has shown its interest in receiving this business into our community, allowing growers to create a business and to sort of embrace your mission. I'm concerned about the location of this proposed business right alongside a rail trail. Before the meeting, I read your presentation. I just saw it again. I'm concerned about the odor that will be coming from the building right on top of this recreational asset of ours, which is heavily traveled by young people as well as adults in our community. Can you, again, help me understand how the odor will be eliminated such that these pedestrians or recreational users will not detect or even know what's going on in your building?
Egan, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So in regards to actual cultivation spaces that will house the plants, and most of the odor would essentially come from, along with the post-harvest areas, dry rooms, cure rooms, trim rooms, packaging rooms. This will be a sealed facility. We'll use HVAC systems that don't exhaust the return air outside, and that will allow us to trap 90% of the odor, along with outfitting those systems with a FogCo odor suppression system that actually releases a select aroma to cover up the volatile organic compounds within the air that would be producing those odors. Excuse me. So the most vulnerable places that actually allow air outside would be the entry points and the receiving areas, which we plan to outfit with vestibules, and also have the odor suppression system counteracting the cannabis odor at the time of a door opening, or any chance where air would be able to escape the building itself.
Giga, if I heard you correctly, you mentioned a percentage of the air that would be cleaned effectively or filtered. What was that percentage again?
That was roughly 90% of the air within the mechanical system itself being that it's a closed loop system, not allowing the return air to be exhausted to the outside environments.
So it's not 100%.
No, that's where the FOGCO, which is a state-of-the-art industry standard odor suppression system, comes into play to make up for that percentage that will be tied into the mechanical system.
That I don't understand. If you could just take 2 seconds to help me make the connection between the 90%, which is being scrubbed by filter, and this 10% piece, because I understood when you first explained it that the fog was complementing the 90% scrubber.
No.
Maybe
The
I'm wrong
90%
terms, but
filtration.
help me understand.
Absolutely. The 90% filtration is just from the filtration of the mechanical system itself. The FOGCO system is an addition that will make up for the remaining percentage of odor mitigation. And this is a standard system that's used in the food industry, whether it's the sriracha plant that is releasing volatile pepper odor compounds that can actually physically burn people's eyes by walking through, Purina dog food. It's a pretty foul smell when they're manufacturing dog foods and dog treats. So it's the same exact system that would go into those types of operations on a commercial level that would mitigate the odor of cannabis coming out of our facility on top of the mechanical system itself. So it's actually, it's fogging a layer of fog, scented fog within the mechanical trunks that pre-filtered air is running through that fog blanket to trap any additional volatile organic compounds that would lead to that odor of cannabis, if that makes sense.
I understand it more clearly now. I still have some reservations about the odor. I understand it sounds like Story's doing its best to mitigate that, but as far as I'm concerned, you're sitting right on top of a trail. So I still have my misgivings, Egan. Forgive me for really, protecting the interests of the recreational user first.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate your explanation.
If I could add, this is a very, very similar situation to what we dealt with with a facility that was outfitted and that I designed about 4 years ago in Hancock, Maryland. It sits about 200 feet away from the Chesapeake, Ohio rail trail that is constant year-round usage with, cyclists and walkers, the community utilizing that trail for recreational activities, along with a Hancock Elementary, which is about 505 feet exactly away from the property line of this cannabis facility that has their baseball fields, track, tons of outdoor activities with those children and their parents. And we've been up and running there for a little over 3 years, 3.5 years or so, with zero complaints from the town. We'd be happy to dive more into that at any time or give you some testimonials or anything like that, just to validate the systems in place that do work to mitigate that odor. And that is a very similar situation to what this is right now.
Okay, Ben, any questions?
Yeah, I do have a couple questions here. So thank you very much for the presentation and the information. You heard some of the questions I asked in the previous presentation, so you certainly answered some of those. I think the first one I have actually is for the town administrator. Has the planner and the building inspector, I think they were going to review this today?
So the odor control systems were sent on Friday. I got those to Mark and Karen, and so they were going to comp it out. I didn't have Mark and Karen in today.
Okay.
But in looking at sort of everything that the group has said, it's certainly the best technology that exists right now in this field, including other fields that were described.
Okay.
I'd be happy to track down the testimonials that were mentioned and make sure that Mark and Karen get back to you.
Yeah.
If that's something that
I just like their feedback. I just like to know what they think about this. I mean, I have concerns about the proximity not only to the rail trail, but there's some pretty close homes not too far from this facility as well. So I just want to make sure, I want to be a little more vigilant about those kinds of things, and just making sure that everybody's chiming in with their 2 cents if it's necessary. Question for, I'm not sure who from Story. So one of the things we talk about a lot here is with respect to sustainability. I appreciate you talking about things like light pollution and things like that. So I think that's, I applaud you for considering that. But could you talk a little bit about water use and what kind of system you would be installing here? We have our own water system in Holliston. So, we're trying to manage what's going on. So just curious if, is there any recycling of water going on, or what kind of usage of water are you taking from the network that we have?
Evan, I can speak to that if you'd like me to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we are hydroponic growers. We will use biodegradable medias for when we dispose of the substrate that we actually cultivate the rootstock in. And not reutilize the soil, much like the previous presentation was explaining. But this facility with the 23,000 square feet of canopy proposed would use about 8,000 gallons a day. And we will be setting up a full recycling system where we'll capture every drop that is removed from the desiccation systems with the HVAC, along with the fertigation system, send it back through a series of filtration processes with UV and neo-oxygenation, and then back through our RO system to sanitize, purify, and reuse that water on a daily basis.
And do you have a sense of how much of that 8,000 gallons you think would be recycled?
So with the 8,000 gallons of usage, it's about 20 to 30%, depending on the activity at the given time. We don't transplant our plants every single day, but on a weekly basis, we will be transplanting from the clone stage to their final media. We do utilize a little bit more water during that activity, which is an increase in runoff. However, the system will be sized appropriately with plenty of redundancy to capture the amount of water we intend to use.
Also switching gears a little bit, as we talked about with the residents nearby, could you talk a little bit more about the noise mitigation efforts? I mean, you mentioned the screen, and some of the things you would be doing would be hours of operation. Would you be trying to, obviously like HVAC systems and filtration systems will be moving more 24/7, but could you just talk a little bit more about the noise levels for the community and what you expect? Would it be disruptive, bangs, anything like that, or is it just going to be kind of like a normal, like a hum from fans kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say just a normal commercial HVAC system hum. No bangs, no sirens, nothing too disruptive other than the mechanical systems themselves, which we utilize systems that are insulated internally. And then we've, also been discussing the options for the types of walls, whether that's CMU block or what type of material that would be to help insulate that sound from escaping the property. And Marcus, if you want to jump in, go ahead.
Operationally, there is not a lot of deliveries that happen at this site, and there's not a lot of large vehicles that have to back up and have a backup beep, which is primarily industrial facilities, one of the biggest complaints from the adjacent properties. And so most of the day-to-day operations is done with regular vehicles that do not have any of these sirens or buttons. As Egan was talking about, now the mechanical equipment, your largest piece there is fans, and mainly people complain about mechanical equipment kicking on and off. In this facility, it will mainly always be on, so that engaging initial sound of that cranking is not something that is riddled to the neighbors. And then also it is below the fence level and contained, and versus rooftop equipment. Most of this will be ground mounted, and we will have sound back walls around that equipment. And then on the roof, we have sound attenuation, but it also is just for visual aspects. You can see that from the ground and from the trail. So it not only is the sound mitigated with that, but the sound as well. I mean, the visual aspect of it as well. Deliveries all happen during the day. This isn't a situation where you're having nighttime and weekend deliveries. So most of the time when there is disruptions like that, it's when other people are 8 to 5.
And if I could add to the delivery aspect, we do order our consumable supplies soil and fertilizer, which are the two biggest items that would be coming on, box truck size vehicles. We order those in quarterly supplies, so we're only delivering, once every 3 months to the facility. And other than that, it's just daily employee traffic, and then product distribution traffic, which will most likely be limited to once a week.
My last question, could you, if you were operating, could you talk a little bit about any plans that you have to engage with the community in any respect? Just if you have any plans, or if there's anything that you'd like to do or can do.
Yeah, I'll take that one. There are several different initiatives that we've looked at. One of which is the Friends of Holliston Trails. We know there's some other groups as well, but given the adjacency and certainly the sensitivities, we feel like that would be an initiative that we would be proud of, but B, in terms of talking about not only being a good neighbor, but bringing additional benefit to the community, just aside from the HCA revenue, et cetera, that would be an initiative that, would have a direct benefit, just given our tie to it, and proximity to it. So I think that was one of the ones that we were, focused on as we were kind of thinking through what those initiatives would look like.
Okay, so you do a very nice presentation. I want to thank you for that. I also want to be upfront. It's very clear to me that this is a much less intensive use than perhaps other uses for this facility within an industrial park. So I appreciate that, and your drawings are beautiful. It would definitely be an improvement to this site, and that's exciting. But I do want to be upfront about my concerns about the location. Holliston has made a pretty strong commitment to both safe routes to school and to the rail trail, and this is a very sensitive area in that regard, in that it's immediately adjacent to and then also in the right-of-way for the rail trail. You mentioned you showed the picture. I've never seen inside the building, and you showed the pictures of the rail tracks actually going right through the building. I mean, it sits 10 feet off of midpoint, I believe, on the trail. So again, a very sensitive location. That's a high bar to clear for me. And I say that because, odor is significant. Odor is a memory. Odor is something that people have a very strong response to. And normalizing adult use in terms of substances like marijuana in areas that children regularly visit, that's an issue for me. So I want to be really upfront about that. I am one of 3. I think we're hearing some hesitancy. I think we're hearing some requests for more information to have our subject matter experts really for the town, which would be our building inspector and to a certain extent our town planner, be able to give some feedback. We have had our building inspector respond, if I'm correct on this, Travis. We have in the past had our building inspector here in Holliston respond to calls for odor control from residents in odor issues for other facilities. You are not responsible for that, and you know nothing about that. I understand that, but it is something the town would be aware of from our prior history. And I've never seen a FOGCO system in a working environment, so I don't know how to vet the level of odor control that what you're proposing offers. And so I come back to the sensitive area that this site is. And so I just want to be, again, upfront about that. We heard from the town administrator that we are active with issuing host community agreements for marijuana cultivators and manufacturers. We are not a town that shuns it, that doesn't welcome it. And I'm just curious if the activity suggests that there are locations available in this town. We've seen a flurry of activity recently. And I'm just curious to know if you've explored other sites. You don't have to get into that tonight, but I don't want you walking away thinking that Holliston's not interested in Story. Holliston's concerned about the sensitive area that this is, at least from where I sit and how I see this. So I'm going to put that out there. I'm going to turn to the viewers, see if there's anybody on the Zoom call who'd like to ask a question, and then we'll come back to the board to see how we want to move forward. So is there anybody on the call who would like to ask a question or make a public comment? Okay, I see Sarah Baruch's hand up, so same thing, Sarah, introduce yourself, please, with your name and your address.
Sure, thank you again. Sarah Baroud, 21 Lowland Street. I'll ask kind of a different question this time. Thanks for all that information. Two quick questions, hopefully. How many employees do you anticipate would be coming and going each day? And also, are there any other facilities that kind of are similar to this? It sounds like you guys, are top of the line in terms of this industry, but anything local that someone like myself could just go check out, like from the outside, to kind of get a sense of what this really smells like, looks like, sounds like? That would be helpful. Thank you.
I'm not sure if you can take it or
Mike,
Mark
I'd be
wants to take it.
I could speak to some of this if you don't
Please.
mind. I would say the closest facility that still has quite a few differences would be the PharmaCann facility. It's a state-of-the-art building. However, it's also it's like a modified greenhouse. So we would not be building a greenhouse. And if you were to go by that facility, you could definitely get an idea for the aroma. But also, I'm not specific. I know they are doing odor mitigation in there. I'm just not exactly sure what systems and to what extent they're using. So I'll preface that with that. From the quality of a visual appeal to the community, it's going to be close with what we're trying to do. Put up a very clean building, clean operation. So without knowing the area too intensely, that would be my suggestion.
Egan, if I could just jump in, and I do not
Yep.
have the address in front of me, but when we made a site visit to this particular property, Marcus and I also were essentially let know by the property manager that there's another facility in this particular park, and we went and visited it, so we certainly could provide that. But I will say that they were doing a wonderful job. The facility's fantastic, and I couldn't tell that there was cannabis there. So, and it's, again, not a greenhouse. It's fully indoor, as we would be doing.
Thanks for adding that, Evan. I wasn't aware of that. Appreciate it.
Is that the one that got the certificate of occupancy for October of 2020?
That's 29 Everett Road.
Okay, is that the one you're referring to, the one within the Lowland Industrial Park?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sarah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And then just the question about how many employees would be coming and going every day.
So with the 23,000 square feet of canopy, we'll be looking about anywhere from 40 to 50. But we'll run 2 different shifts, so it wouldn't be all at once. If that helps answer that question.
Yep, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Anybody else from the call? I don't see the hand. Okay, Liz Tyler, if you could just, your name and your address, please.
Yes, this is Liz Tyler out at 17 Norland Street. And I have 2 concerns. The first one is even the whole question of water. The last applicant was going to use 5,000 gallons a day. And this applicant, even after they do their recycling, is going to be using 6,000 gallons a day. I'm just wondering if the water department has some input into this in terms of, with our well situation and with the drought situation we have now, what can we really allow someone to take this amount of water every day from our wells?
Liz, do I understand you correctly that you were wondering if we received any feedback on this and the previous proposal from the DPW superintendent? Is that your question?
Right, or do you plan to? Because this is it seems to me to be a great amount of water.
Travis, can you address that, or?
Sure. So I think it falls into a few different topics that we're sort of going around here that are related to the fact that the select board is hearing from a business before all of these questions would get answered normally through the planning board process, zoning board of appeals, right? It's a little bit awkward in that, some companies will require the HCA to be able to move forward on a property, and therefore that puts them in front of the select board before they go through a number of questions that would get answered before they ever come in front of the select board. And it's just a process that's out of our hands. So the answer is that we can certainly get feedback from the water department, on where this would sit in terms of industrial users. Obviously, we've seen other companies with similar business models operate without overtaxing the system. But we can look at where where they sit, and how many more sort of businesses that are like this. The problem also that I see in saying whether or not this particular business is water use, just as it is the same as saying this particular use's impact on the community, is that what are we comping it against, right? At some point, there's another business that needs to be in this facility. I don't know what I'd be saying, that hypothetical business taking over the Flex Ed building would use for water, and therefore I can't really compare it.
Right.
We certainly, I can ask the question, I guess is the point, but I think that those are the complicating factors in giving a yes or no answer that we can or cannot, that it would not impact the overall water system.
It's a comprehensive question for a specific applicant, so perhaps there's more. So Liz, does that answer your question, or do you have any other comments?
No, well, I hope that you're able to, I understand but if there's another user that comes into this facility, if they're not growing marijuana, they're probably not going to be using 6,000 gallons of water a day. So I just think that this is a question that needs to be addressed from the question of water usage, both for the previous applicant and this applicant.
I'd like to add something to it, if I may.
Okay.
And Liz, thank you for bringing this up. I did not clarify this when I originally stated water usage. A great portion of that usage would be captured from our condensate pulled from the dehumidification and the air conditioning with the desiccation that's created. So 6,000 gallons of water usage, yes. Not all of that will be pulled from the well. About 50% of that would be. The plants transpire so much water into the environment that we are removing with the air conditioning and the dehumidification, and by recapturing that and putting that back through our filtration system and into our storage tanks allows us to utilize that the following day and not actually have to pull all 6,000 gallons from the well like you're speaking. So I hope that helps clarify a little bit.
Not exactly, because previously you said that there was 20% that was recycled, and you started with 8,000.
No, ma'am, I did not. I said 20% of the runoff coming through the plants was recycled. So, and I thought maybe that was the question that was asked, was how much runoff was generated through the irrigation. I was not speaking about the amount of water captured from the air conditioning and dehumidification.
Thank you, Egan. And Liz, I think your question still stands somewhat separate anyway, which is to get feedback from the DPW in terms of drawing down on our water supply when it comes to high water usage businesses like this. I'm not sure how specific it's going to be to Story of Massachusetts or any one particular cannabis grower, but as a general question, I think Travis can get us some information that can guide us as we look at all of these sort of requests. I think that's kind of what you were getting at. If you're okay with that, we're going to leave it with Travis.
Yeah, I have another quick question, and that is, what I understood was that they were going to use some kind of a odor control so that it would cover the odor. So this says to me that there must be some odor that they expect to be coming out if they need to use something to cover the odor.
Right, and I think the board's making, through our comments and questions, making it clear we're looking for some more information from our building inspector, and I believe we've communicated clearly with Story of Massachusetts that those are also our concerns, and I'm hearing from you, Liz, it's one of yours as well.
Yes, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Liz.
All right, so we have another hand up, and it's Paul Langton. So again, your name and your address, please.
Hi, this is Karen Langton using Paul Langton's device, 100 Woodland Street, Holliston, Massachusetts. I'm going to echo the same concerns, but I'm going to ask a slightly varied question. In regard to the fragrance, aroma, etc., that is going to be used to cover up and mitigate the cannabis odor, I'm wondering if that has been approved by the FDA. I understand that covering up odors typically leaves us then with another smell. And I'm wondering, first off, what that smell is. And then secondly, since the rail trail is used as an exercise facility, people on that facility will be inhaling at a much deeper rate than normal. And over long periods and use of time, I'm wondering what impact this might have on our health. Additionally, since it is used as a safe route to school, and we have children that are walking on the trail and they potentially are going to be inhaling this cover-up aroma, children use oxygen at a much higher and intensive rate than adults, and I'm wondering what impact it could have on them as well. Thank you. That is my question.
Thank you, Karen. Is that you, Egan, or Marcus, or anyone else from the story would like to answer that question or address her comment?
This is Eben, and I can speak to that. So there's a few different compounds that are used and I think maybe that there's a little bit of confusion with the word cover up. These compounds actually oxidize. They attach to the air that's being exhausted attaches, or the fog attaches to it essentially, and they oxidize the odoriferous. Those are also VOCs or other compounds produced by the cannabis product itself. Now, to speak to the question of whether these products are FDA approved, the answer is yes. It's allowable, and they're used in there's a few different products. But one of which is used in food packaging, so food or packaging that is rated to be in contact with food, and then a couple of the other ones are you basically used in or parts of salt. So I don't know if that covers it, and we certainly can provide more information at a later date. We were under the impression that this was sort of a little bit more of a broad stroke, so we definitely can drill down and provide as much as anyone wants to be a party to.
Yeah, and I would say this too, the FOGCO system has all sorts of spec sheets that we'd be happy to provide. It's got additional information as well. So to the extent that that's helpful, we can certainly provide that backup specific to the system as well.
And I do want to just add one more thing that really does apply there. They use this in sanitation transfer stations and the like, where they, in those particular applications, they have fog systems that are on the ceiling, so the fog actually rains down essentially on the piles of rubbish, which of course, as we know, they will have the employees are certainly operating tractors to move the stuff around, so there's direct exposure in all manner of industries that are utilizing these types of systems. And FOGCO has been around, I think, since maybe
30 years.
Yeah. So they are a very established company. This is not just like they've adapted this to cannabis and sort of tailored it, but this is not a new technology, so to speak.
Karen, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, actually, you just said the thing I was most afraid of. We do have a transfer station in town that actually does use this technology, and it's rather ineffective, quite frankly, and the abutters around there would probably tell you that. So I am concerned. It's 30 years old, so it's old technology, and I'm concerned about the effectiveness that it would have in actually attaching itself to the odor and removing the odor without leaving another weird smell in its place. And again, I believe, as Tina had said, the concern about smells committing memory to young people and it becoming a nostalgic kind of view. I think the board has plenty of these concerns as well. So I'm fine for now, but I look forward to more information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, any other questions or comments from the listeners on Zoom? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on. So the board has a couple of decisions that it can make. One is to entertain a motion to approve or deny, or to postpone. The other is to turn to the town administrator and request more information from the building inspector. So, Jonathan, do you have any?
Yeah, I've got concerns. I mentioned them, and I'm for having Travis follow through with some of our town officials, experts, to give us more information.
Okay.
No, I concur, and I'd like to hear, if possible, from Robert Wydeck, the Rail Trails, if he has any comments about the proximity or, with the rail trail being so close by, if we could get just his feedback on this project as well. But yeah, I'd like more information.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, so I think one of the things is obviously giving the group a sort of sense if more information is what's needed.
Right.
There are some timelines here that we need to be cognizant of. So I'll move quickly, bring this back to the board if that's what you're looking for. So on the smell, the spec sheet was provided on Friday, and I did get that for the FOGCO system to the building inspector, and I'll have him follow up as soon as possible. Additionally, I got it to Karen Sherman, the town planner, and just haven't had the ability to get that feedback for you yet, which I'll do that. Also, the applicant mentioned, getting testimonials from a similar facility that they have in Hancock, Maryland. Are we interested in that?
I see the use as somewhat different. Again, just the location, but sure. I mean, why would we ever say no to good information provided?
And then, so water department feedback on the overall use of the system for these types of commercial uses, putting it in the larger context of our water. And then I believe, sort of some of the feedback that Ms. Langton mentioned would fall within getting that feedback and technical assistance from our building inspector.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Thank you for the presentation. I hope you were anticipating some of the questions that you got. I think we're trying to be upfront and clear about our concerns and give you every opportunity to address them. So appreciate you giving us some time to work through the concerns with this sensitive location, and also appreciate the depth and quality of the presentation you provided the board. So thank you very much, and we'll let Travis follow up with you as necessary.
Well, likewise, thanks very much for the time and consideration, and we'll look forward to getting any information that you need.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
We're going to move on now to the coronavirus community update. We are heading into 8:45. We will appreciate everybody's patience as we get to this robust agenda. That is the word.
Oh, it's been a long time since I've used robust agenda.
No, it's pretty robust.
Oh, I agree. I just don't want to have it be attributed to me. So back in November, the town treasurer had sent a request for some CARES funds, which the board voted on December 7th of 2020, whereby due to the higher than normal unemployment bills resulting from COVID-19, we had switched some of the unemployment bill expenses from the unemployment budget to CARES in the amount of $147,583.46 based on bills that were provided from March to October of 2020. As you may recall, there was some concern that there had been some fraudulent unemployment claims, and as that was being addressed by the Treasurer's Office, there was also some focus on Beacon Hill because this was widespread, it was not just us. So certainly our legislative delegation had been very aggressive in trying to ensure that the needs of communities were being addressed there. But some of those fraudulent claims have been weeded out, and as of our May 2021 bill from the DUA, we had a credit. And so as we're looking to close out our fiscal year 21 books, the recommendation from our town accountant through the town administrator, and I certainly would be in support of it, would be that we would back out $22,000 from the previous journal entry that was voted back in December, and reclassify those costs to the unemployment line of
913-51780. You mentioned a credit. What is that credit for?
So basically, they charged us initially,
Dollar amount,
the 12,000.
Thank you.
Sure.
As of May. The problem is that we won't have the June bill until the end of July. And so I think what Chief Cassidy and I discussed is similar to how the reserve fund has a date to look back at FY '21 of July 15th, that we would consider a similar date for CARES Act transactions to impact the FY '21 budget. And so we will most likely not have the June bill by that date. Based on some trend analysis, we would say that $22,000 sort of covers what we believe. And again, we had this discussion originally. We knew that there was a possibility that some of the charges we were paying for would be fixed eventually. The problem was we never knew when they would get that resolved for us, and it is an ongoing process. Then the other thing to consider is that we're aware of legitimate claims that will be coming from our activity as a town, most likely on the June or July bills, and that, you know, this is going to be a dynamic, fluid situation, and so by simply reversing $22,000 now does not stop the board from then addressing if there are increased unemployment claims that come in June, July, August, to take action at that time that would then actually impact the FY '22 budget, and would actually spread out the impact of the CARES Act for the betterment of the town.
Okay, John, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay, Ben? All right, so you're looking for a vote from the select board to, you use back out, that is not the right word, I'm looking.
Reverse
Okay.
$22,000 from the December 7th vote and reclassify the costs.
Okay, John, do you have that motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Done, thank you.
Great, thank you. And just very quickly on the ARPA, we continue to get additional guidance from Treasury through DLS, and the ARPA working group continues to prepare its outreach to departments, boards, and committees. We've got some drafts internally that we're looking at, and probably giving boards, committees, and departments about a month initially to provide feedback once we give them the memo with the guidance. We're being supported very robustly right now by our IT director, who's hoping to make sure that the form that we're going to make available, when it captures information, hopefully will not result in someone having to do those keystrokes a second time, and that it can all go either into a Google Doc, a PDF database, or some other database that's searchable, so that we will be able to see all of the requests that come in and track them as a group.
We also created for us a single point of contact for when we do reach out, not only to departments, boards, and committees to solicit requests for ARPA funding, but also if we're able to reach out to the community at large for any requests that may work with ARPA, that people have somewhere to send those requests, and that is the ARPA steering at holliston.k12.ma.us, our standard email address. And so Mr. Mayo has been very helpful in getting that group's work up and running, and I look forward to kicking it off.
Do I understand you correctly? You will be soliciting community feedback?
Yeah, so the ARPA steering group's
the
initial focus has been getting the most comprehensive yet user-friendly guidance to send out with the instructions, provide departments, boards, committees, and the community at large the ability to go through one channel to make those requests. Then the ARPA steering group, working group, will also have very many other tasks to go about, which is to look at the holistic view of a sizable amount of money to be used over an extended period of time. So those are the sort of two different avenues going at the same period, right? Giving the community the ability to sort of understand what may be in their department, may be in their service area, and make requests accordingly. And then also for this group to look holistically and set out the guidance for the coming few fiscal years that ARPA runs through.
Okay. Questions, comments?
No, I'm on the committee, so we'll pour our questions inward. reaction, I think every city and town in America, not to be exaggerated, but I think everyone has to realize what we're about to do is the same kind of business all at once. So whatever costs people are thinking of right now need to be inflated. Over the next 3 years, there's going to be a ton of money from this federal program pumped into public works and other style projects that over a very short period of time are going to overwhelm the market of available resources to deliver it. So between costs and then timing to complete those projects in a relatively short period of time, the group has some sort of assessments to make to right size and correct the expectation of getting it done in that time period. So it's not just filtering or applying the rule of whether or not the project fits within the program. It's assessing, can I really dig, 10 miles of trenches in 3 years and get it done? While every community around us is looking for the same resource. So there's a little bit more to this than what I think people are realizing, but we'll see how it plays out down the road.
Similar like PE at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was looking for.
Excellent analogy. Excellent analogy.
We should also be cognizant of how that might impact if we do any projects that might fall into ARPA that are not being funded through ARPA too. So we should just maybe we hold off, or we rethink some of those things with inflation and costs. So sort of just keep that in mind as we start doing some planning for some of those projects.
Absolutely. Okay. That's all I have. Thanks, Mike. Great.
All right. Thank you. So moving on, that was both Chief Kathy, 4 and 5. Thanks very much.
Very efficient.
Okay, so we'll move through the warrant, John?
So this evening's warrant totals $394,048.81.
Okay, a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on, that passes. Public comment. So, John or Ben, do you have any public comment for this?
I do have a comment. So, I know you folks were at the first farmer's market. I was out of town, so I went to the second one. And it was a different farmer's market than the one you saw. It was a little scaled back. Great time, all in all, really excellent event. I do want to call attention to the parking. It was always my concern about the event. I encountered at least one neighbor who was very concerned about the parking on Sundays. She came out, talked about the folks parking, on the area up against her property, and it's impactful. She's within throwing distance of the trail, has a long history of working with people as they use the trail. But this event has, for a period of hours now, consumed a big part of her day trying to manage the traffic around her property. It occurs to me that maybe, Travis, through you, we could ask Chief Stone to evaluate temporary no parking signs in certain areas where it might be useful. I would accept the Chief's recommendations for the board's consideration. Absolutely. Because there is obviously some available parking that is alongside the trail, but the side streets where the homeowners reside is being impacted. Personally, I wouldn't want it, but I'd like to hear his feedback on alternatives and ways to post temporary no parking so that they can enjoy their property while we're enjoying farmers.
Just a follow-up question, if I may. Did you get a sense that the municipal parking lot was, I don't know if you had a chance, you probably did not walk down there, but was it your sense that that was tapped out and that was what was, is this a matter of directing people to a municipal parking lot, or is this about too many cars simply for the capacity?
I would say it's probably more the former, Tina.
Okay. I think signage goes a long way here as well. We'll see what Chief Stone has to say.
I think just to put something on your radar as well, and I know we may have discussed it previously, but we're going to run into an issue with that municipal lot having to be utilized as the construction project starts relatively soon. So I think certainly indicating where people can't park is going to be important to alleviate the neighbors, and then also sort of identifying where those are. I can look at a variety of items and bring them back to you.
That's it, Tina.
Thank you, John.
No comment.
Okay, I have no public comment. Anybody on the Zoom call with public comment for this evening? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on. Seeing none, yeah, we're going to move on to comments from the town administrator.
Okay, I got a
Keep your
last.
presentation at 15 minutes, please.
A last-minute request here from the Park Director, Mark Frank, who I often confuse with Mark Kafferline. and I'm gonna have to figure out a way to differentiate them. The first summer concert is tomorrow night at Goodwill. The Parks Department worked with Chief Cassie to make sure that he was comfortable with this, and they have pushed this out through their social media, the email list, and the Holliston Reporter, but they wanted it announced at this meeting as well. They're very excited. The first summer concert tomorrow night at Goodwill. That would be Tuesday, June 29th at Goodwill Park. Okay, additionally, some firsts. The Comprehensive Long Range Plan Committee, of which you have designated Mr. Sparrow, has its first meeting that is actually now posted for July 14th at 7 p.m. via Zoom. I would assume that that group will probably be meeting in person after Labor Day, but at the moment, to get a robust-sized group of 16 current members, potentially 17 overall, they will start out by Zoom. I will kick off that meeting until they have elected some leadership, which may be after a couple meetings. So I'll be with them on June 14th for the Comprehensive Long Range Plan Committee first meeting. Their agenda is posted online if you go to our calendar for July 14th. Additionally, on the town's website, after our discussion last week, is a live survey. Let me pull up our website here. Okay, so right on the cover of our website, if you scroll down, number 2 under COVID-19 is help decide what happens to 260 Woodland Street. And there is a survey to take, we have a couple pictures here, an explanation of what the information we're looking for, where the site sits, and a couple pictures of the site. So on the left here, with this picture is if you are standing on the trail looking at the site, and on the right is if you walk in to see the scale of the site. We're looking for people to identify themselves so we can make sure that it's resident feedback. We've provided the 3 options that have been brought to the town as recommendations or requests, and then also the ability for people to fill in if they have another idea that is outside those 3. A couple other questions that we're just looking for feedback on, and if you just hit submit, that information will be compiled, and we will be bringing that back to the select board at a future date for consideration.
Charles, does that have an ending date? The survey is just up and running for the foreseeable future?
We do not have an end date. I think what I'll do is track with the help of the IT director, sort of how many responses we get initially, make an effort to push it out there again, do the Holliston Reporter, some other avenues, and when we begin to see that dying down, we'll discuss as a group if we'd like to close it out, make further efforts based on the feedback that we get. So I'm relying first on the Holliston Reporter running this in our update tomorrow, and then I'll ask them to run it separately, and we'll sort of go through those types of waves to make sure that we get the biggest outreach.
You know, just a footnote, Travis, over the years, I love the idea of us, throwing surveys like this out there. I compliment you and Chris for pulling it together. It's nice. It's helpful. It gives us immediate feedback on what a portion of the citizens in Holliston want. It's a great tool to have. It's going to help this board. It's just another tool in the chest to use going forward. So thanks for making it look easy, and hopefully when the data starts coming in, we can make some sense of it and add it to our thought process. So thanks. Nice job. Nice job, Chris.
Right. Thank you to Chris, as always, as he's been brought up for doing these things for us in a couple different avenues, but this one I'm hoping we'll get a great response from as well. With that, I just wanted to mention one other thing, which is that the EDC was looking for support services. We posted that for a part-time consultant on a couple web boards. We did not get a sizable response, so we've taken a separate approach for the EDC, which is to send out an RFP directly to consultants who do this work, soliciting proposals, and that went out today. And I'm hoping that I'll at least have some responses to bring to them at their July meeting, if not August. So that RFP went out to consultants today, and we posted on the website as well. And that's all I have.
Okay. I'm going to ask for a bottom of the 7th break, comfort break. That's okay. It will be 2 minutes, and then we can resume.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you for waiting patiently. We are back, and we're going to continue on with our agenda, which means we are looking at FY '21 year-end budget transfers. And I think, Travis, you're going to take that one off?
Sure. So, let me just catch my breath here. I believe I sent this out. So I had a conversation with the town accountant this afternoon. And so, excuse me, just trying to pull up. Oh, I put them in a separate folder. Sorry. All right, so I can pull these up on the screen just so people can see them, and you can take a motion however you see fit. There are quite a few. They are all relatively mundane. And when I say mundane, I'm talking about the idea that sometimes from time to time, we do run into some issues at the year end where we need to move money into accounts. The reserve fund is also something that we have set up to handle any sort of year-end needs. At this point, all of these requests are handled within the budget. The ones in red, highlight bold, are coming from budgets that are not the particular budget that they are impacting. All of the other ones are essentially within the budget itself, transferring from quote-unquote buckets that I like to call. So, for example, there are 4 buckets of the select board budget. One is personnel. Another is sort of office supplies, right? So office supplies we went over, and I can go over that from the professional technical line where we have significant balance. That money would be moved. It's all within the select board budget. So again, the ones with red are coming from budgets outside, and the areas that we have there are unemployment, which we discussed earlier under CARES. Even with that activity that we did, these 2 transfers will still be fine. And then the other ones are from the health insurance budget where we often budget for any fluctuations in enrollment. And so we did have somewhat of budget capacity here at the end of the year, and those will cover these overages. So I can answer any questions. The only one I would point out specifically, because we also had it as a conversation with CARES, is the trash removal. So what we did earlier in the year was Matt Zedek, the sustainability coordinator, did an analysis on how we were running for trash removal related to COVID. That was increased tipping fees through Wheelabrator or increased bulk pickups through Harvey's. At this point, I can do a similar analysis or extrapolate his analysis and look forward. We're probably looking at an annualized about $20,000. So either way, we could look at charging some of that to CARES. In reality, we have the capacity within the budget to cover the $60,000 that the town accountant is projecting. So we can have a discussion of whether or not we'd like to enter CARES into this conversation, but at the end of the day, it is in some way sort of moving change around in the bowl. If we use the CARES, that balance does not carry forward into 22. At the same time, if we use CARES, then this sits in the budget, and then it will be certified as free cash. Again, I don't have a strong opinion either way, but the way that it is currently situated, if we want to make a motion for, and then again, all of the backup has been put together for you here by the town accountant. This is just a summary. If we want to make this as a blanket motion, I'm comfortable with that. If we want to discuss CARES for that one specifically, we can certainly do that. I don't have any other highlights here. There's nothing. These are all pretty much standard practice year-end transfers that you would see in any community.
Okay, John, any questions or comments?
Sure. First question, Travis. A year from now, if we're looking at the same list of transfers, will we see about half as many lines because of the new budget format?
Yes. So the new format, so for example, office supplies in the select board budget is a $300 budget that was voted separately in FY '21 and in '22 as part of a bigger bucket, so we would not need to do this. So it will be streamlined substantially, yes.
I'd like to move the $60,000 off to CARES. That's real money to us, turn it into free cash. But I'd like to hear from you or Mike that it's CARES, it's there because of CARES, but it's there because of COVID.
So part of my concern, certainly with the full amount of the $60,000, is that some of these things are certainly COVID impacted, and some of them are, generally speaking, our new reality, our new normal. So what we did for the FY '22 budget is we took the trend analysis of what we were currently looking at, and we increased the budget to that amount. That was a little bit painful to do in the FY '22 budget cycle, but we didn't foresee a complete reversal, right? There are people who are staying home more regardless of the fact that they can now go back to the office. People are working from home. That's a new reality that we have. And so the analysis that Matt Zedek did that led to about $40,000 being charged for the months through November, if I extrapolate that, I use the trend analysis and I bring it up through May's bills from Harvey's and Wheelabrator, it would probably be about $40,000 again. So we would still be looking at a transfer within the FY '21 budget, but we could certainly look at making that adjustment to CARES for a portion of it.
I recall having this conversation at some point in the middle of COVID that this was a phenomenon, and I might be wrong, but I do recall there was a lot of conversations. Chief Cassidy will talk about a lot of stressors during COVID. One of them was, when are you going to open up the Marshall Street dump? People were at home. They were cleaning out all kinds of yard waste and other materials, recyclables, and we were pressed to kind of confront the fact that people were busy at home during this time period. I'm quite comfortable moving $60,000 off to CARES. As long as you feel as though that number fits within the trend during that time period, I'm fine. In terms of going forward, Travis, it's an interesting conversation. I think it's a separate conversation. How the new norm is affecting our costs going forward. We have resources right now that the federal government recognizes are eligible costs, and I think we should be utilizing first and foremost. So, Tina, if it's okay with you, I'll make a motion to move $60,000 of trash removal costs from the health insurance budget. Is that correct? Nope. Sorry.
That was where this was going to come
I'm sorry, from the solid waste trash budget, and book those expenses to the CARES Act.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That's one line item within the transfers here, so
Do you want to take a motion for, the interest of time, Travis, for the remaining, and just acknowledge that as presented, the board would approve the transfers as presented, excluding the $60,000 item I just mentioned? Sure.
that's a motion then.
I'll make that motion then.
Okay.
I will second it, but I do have two quick questions.
Yes, please.
My first question is, it doesn't look like it, but are any of these potentially that could mean that we need to adjust budgets for FY '22? Or are they just like one time? It looks like mostly one time thing. Like, I mean, obviously, like, you know, repairs and things like that, we're not going to see recurring, but some things like, you know, with some, you know, uniforms and equipment for officers, some of those kinds of things. Is there any potential that some of this stuff might need budget adjustments?
No, these are pretty specific to FY '21. Snow and ice we did feel like we took care of at the annual town meeting, and this was because late bills can come in.
Yep.
But otherwise,
bills and
yeah,
you
so
know, dog tags and things like that. I mean, they're small numbers.
The
but-
phone does impact two of these, including accounting and clerk, that we've sort of addressed, and I don't see an issue with the way that the '22 budget is set up. So no, I think all of these are pretty standard fare. Nothing that is a red flag in my opinion.
Okay. And then my other question is specifically the structural repairs for the police.
Yes.
What's that?
So that was one where, and I've discussed this a couple times with the finance committee, and I think we had at least one discussion here as well. This dates back quite midway through the fiscal year. So there was an issue with the wall of the garage in that building. Obviously, James Keith became involved and saw it to fruition. We pushed Maya multiple times of why it was or was not going to be covered under insurance, and I will just tell you that James Keith did not go lightly on that, but we did. It did turn out that we were not going to get reimbursed from insurance for it, so that got absorbed into the police budget. At that point, we had a mid-year budget supplemental appropriation into facilities, which at one point, you know, we were thinking, if the police budget were unable to cover their own costs, would be able to tap into it. At the end of the day, the police budget can absorb their own costs internally, and what they're transferring is within the police budget.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
So that, I believe Travis finishes up the, year-end budget transfers.
That is it.
All right, so we're gonna move on to
What-
board.
Quick question, do you envision any reserve fund transfers? These are just transfers interdepartment, right? These aren't.
There is nothing on the town side that would require a reserve fund transfer. It is potential, the school committee has 2 meetings, that, still could be requested. And as I said, there is anything that could still, hit the fan, that would allow us to go back and also request the year-end transfer, line item transfer, or reserve fund transfer between now and July 15th. It's better not to rely on that period of time because it requires, one, that we get this group together with a quorum, and then also the finance committee together with a quorum. It's better if we tie it up as quickly as possible. I don't have anything that I am aware of that will be a reserve fund transfer request.
That's outstanding news. Thank you, Mr. Town Administrator. Well done.
All right, that said, would you like to run through the board business just because they are, I think they're all in your folder there, John?
Sure.
What?
I
What
just,
is it?
I'm remembering wistfully, this is my,
Oh.
my area.
The Holliston Lions Club is seeking an event permit for its club carnival on July 7th through the 10th.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second that?
All in favor?
Aye. Stand by 1 second. Travis, is it simply a motion or is there a signature on this, application from the Lions Club for the event permit?
Just a signature.
Someone might have to show me where.
Okay.
Chief signed his. We have a Holliston Lions Club carnival schedule.
Okay, if there's no sticker on it, then you may be all set with the vote.
Okay, great. Moving on. The next is a contract award for, design engineering for Blair Square. In this case, the contract is to be awarded to Beals and Thomas, with a total of $51,000. Services associated with the Blair Square design engineering. Motion to, actually, I have a motion here, don't I? Move to award the contract for the Blair Square design and engineering to Beals and Thomas for a contracted amount of, we have an issue.
The contracted amount is $44,500.
For design, development, permitting, construction documentation, and a not-to-exceed limit of $51,000. Thank you for site survey and electrical engineering services if needed. Right,
Okay.
motion.
Do you have a second?
Second.
I have a comment on that. Beals and Thomas, and this is under, I think, just to confirm what you just said, this is under what town meeting approved with the articles.
Yeah, so just for a little history here, we did this as an RFP with, 2 packages. We got, 3 responses, 2 packages. One was a non-price proposal, one's a price proposal. The committee to open the non-price proposals and grade them was, Kevin Conley, the chair of the Blair Square Committee, Ben Sparrow, your representative on the Blair Square Committee, and myself, and that took place, I wanna say last Thursday. That's right. I had one on Friday as well, and that's why I couldn't recall which day was which. We had, as I said, the 3 responses. The grades, the highest were on Beals and Thomas. When the bid packages were open, it was also the one that would fit within the allocation of $45,000 at the town meeting, and had the highest grade of the non-price proposals. The 2 as-needed, one is for a site survey. As you recall, we just made some changes in that area to Front Street through the shared use and spaces. There's also been a couple other changes in that area, so the question was whether or not a new site survey would be needed. We have one from GLM dated 2012, and so it's unclear if that's going to be needed. The other one would be electrical engineering services. We've had some electrical engineering services donated to the town by Griffin Electric for the memorial that is currently being constructed in that area, so it's unclear if that will be needed through this contract. So the actual lump sum amounts for what the clerk mentioned is $44,500.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
I had another comment to make.
I did too.
You were very quick there.
Go ahead.
Did we mention the 100% complete deadline piece?
Right, so,
You want me to read it?
sure.
So this was underneath the motion, Tina. I just
Okay,
wanted to
yep.
expand on it for the record. associated with that Blair Square contract. The 100% complete deadline is 10/15 before the 10/18 special town meeting, but the 50% and 90% completion will get Blair Square Committee the needed documents to request a warrant article for the fall special town meeting.
Great.
Footnote. So thank you, Tina, for that.
And Travis, my only comment is when Beals and Thomas is aware that they were awarded, if they don't already know, that they're competitor, could you ask them to attend one of the farmers markets so they can kind of see, because a part of this is parking and traffic management, if I recall correctly, and perhaps it would be good if they haven't already to come down and check out the farmers market to get a sense of Blair Square right now at its most intensive use. They may learn some information that will be valuable for them. Thank you. All right, that's
Moving on.
2 of 10, I think.
I have a gift donation from the Knights of Columbus Council 14224 to the Veteran Services. The purpose of the gift is to assist veterans and eligible dependents for Metro West Veterans District Emergency Assistance Fund. The Knights of Columbus Council 14224 has generously offered $1,700 for account number 89543-45272, which is the District Emergency Assist Fund. I move to accept the donation on behalf of the town from the Knights of Columbus for this very generous gift.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, thank you.
Next,
So I just gave you one option if you want to read them all together, there, John.
for the appointments, yes.
Yeah, I wrote it out.
We have one more to do. I got the common victuals next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In this case, we have a, common victualler license for Putts and More LLC at 750 Concord Street. There's the motion on this one. And lease expires December 31st, 2021, unless sooner suspended or revoked for violation of the laws of the Commonwealth respecting the licensee of common victuallers. This license is issued in conformity with the authority granted to the licensing authorities by General Laws, Chapter 140, and amendments thereto. This is for Putts and More at 750 Concord Street. Do you require a motion on that, Mr. Ahern? Yes, please.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
I have a comment or question. Is this their first time, do we know if this is the first time they're asking for this one? Or have they done
Yes,
this in the past?
so sometimes, when staff of the town notices that somebody's set up for these types of things, we'll engage the business and sort of explain the process of a common builder's license, and that's.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Now, regarding the appointments, as you mentioned, Mr. Ahern, we have 5 appointments.
I've actually added 2 to the motion.
Thank you so much.
Because, we have, so a few, stragglers were coming in, and so we also caught 2 more that I could do under other business, but I just rolled it into the motion that I wrote out there.
Let me, start by making a motion to appoint, Mr. Robert Fogarty as the Assistant Inspector of Buildings with an expiration of, Is this for a 1-year term?
Yeah, so on the sheet there, if you want to read it off of that.
All right, so instead of, and then we just signed the existing form, okay. Move to appoint the following for 3-year terms: Jennifer Butaro, Conservation Commission; John Geller, Town Forest Committee; and for 1-year terms or less, Robert Fogarty, Assistant Building Inspector; Michael Perkins, Deputy Wiring Inspector; Daniel Brown, Labor Council; Mary Biscay, Treasurer; Kristen Sturley, Assistant Treasurer.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that is it for board business, and so now we move on to other business. John, do you have any other business?
I just want to confirm, are we meeting next Tuesday?
We are meeting next Tuesday, yes.
I would like to wish Holliston a happy 4th of July. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Ben?
I have no other.
I only have I wish I could get my Spotify up and running, but I can't, but congratulations to Chris Mayo, our IT director. We hit 10,000 participants tonight, which means Chris Mayo has overseen remote participation for 10,000 participants, a truly Herculean tack, and I'm pretty sure if it went out as a competition, that Holliston would stand up there among the highest, so much applause and, thanks to Chris for that, and I have no other business, Travis, no other business.
Motion to adjourn? Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you and good night. We'll see you, have a happy 4th, and we'll see you on the 6th.